All right, there it is. Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a little while since our last one, but time marches on as we continue the Harry Potter live commentary series. I'm Cole, joined by Jess again, and we're up to year 3 at Hogwarts. This is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and the main thing I always try not to do as we go forward is not like repeat a bunch of stuff I said in past ones, and we did like the big introduction for the first one just because we talked about the series as a whole, the books as a whole, the movies as a whole, and now we're just trying to basically focus on the books and movies individually as we deal with them. So I don't want to wind up repeating stuff, but I'll just say for a bit of repetition, one thing is like I had read the first 2 books in 1998. My sister had given them to me. She said, read these books, and I liked both of them, and this is the one that had made me a fan though. So by 99, it came out. It was new. My sister read it. I read it. This is where I became a fan. I liked the first 2. They were okay, but I was not necessarily a fan, not necessarily going to continue the series. But I read Prisoner of Azkaban, and this is what definitely made me a fan. And I'll also say, once we got around to the movies being made, I like the movies. This is not my favorite book in the series, but it is my favorite movie. I think it's probably the best adaptation, or at least a combination of best adaptation based on what I think is maybe the best book. I mean, obviously the first 2 are very close as far as being adaptations because they are a bit shorter as books go. Anybody knows the books get longer and more complicated, and which of course, even though the movies are quite long too, this movie's actually a bit shorter than the last one. I mean, it's funny because we think of it wasn't really till 4 that the books started to get really lengthy. And the second book is not that long, but since they didn't cut very much from the second book for the movie, the second movie is quite long. It's like almost 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that. And so this movie is almost 20 minutes shorter than that, even though the book is longer. So that's a bit confusing. So this is my favorite movie, but I will talk about why I think it should have been a tiny bit longer. I don't mean a bunch. I think honestly, like 5-6 extra minutes could have really cleared up a lot. And we'll talk about that going forward. But I'll say this is also really the movie I remember the best from the theater, even though it was over 20 years ago now, even more so than the more recent ones. Part of that is because maybe who I went with, I've gone with one of my friends, my roommate, but we also went with a guy who he was sort of a roommate, like he lived in the same dorm as us. And he's one of the most sincere people I've ever met in my life. You ever meet one of those really super honest, just really sincere people? Like they tell you to have like a really nice day, but like they're not being fake. They just mean it because that's how they are. And this guy was like a super enthusiastic guy, and he was the perfect person to watch any movie with. In that, like, if there's a joke, he just laughs his head off. If something scary, he goes, "Ooh!" So like he's just reacting next to us throughout this whole friggin' movie, which is pretty funny. So I guess that's why I remember it even more vividly than my other theatrical experiences, even though it's further back than most of them, is because I was accompanied by somebody who is just like sort of the ultimate moviegoer, because like literally everything they're trying to get the audience to react to, like he's one of those people who just reacts to it all. Like he's the type of person that will like cheer at a great moment or laugh or cry. Like, the thing, movies push his emotional buttons pretty easily. Like I don't know him anymore, lost track of him a long time ago, but he was a fun guy to be around and live with. And he was definitely fun to go see this movie with. So, what are your thoughts on this third film generally? Like maybe where it fits in?
It ranks high. It's not my favorite, but it does rank up there. It's in the top, possibly the top 3. And I hadn't read the books yet. Hadn't even started. My rule was to read them before I watched them once I started reading them. Or yes. I mean, watch it before I read the book.
Right, yeah.
Sorry. And but I had just moved out to California within probably less than a year still when this came out. And I had a buddy in my apartment building, Jerry, who I went to see this with. And we just somehow connected because he was another movie buff. He actually, I had seen him, but got me more interested in like Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And we, of course, watched many other movies together. But he's like, so yeah, he liked Harry Potter, and it was out in theaters, and we went to the show there. It was like a bargain theater in the San Fernando Valley. I don't even know if it's still standing, or it's most definitely closed by now. And I can't remember the name, but it was one of those that like hadn't been renovated in well over a decade. And this is early 2000s, mind you. So you can picture that. And yeah, it was a good time. It was a good movie. I will admit, and probably bring this up as we go along. Again, the first round I did have a bit, I don't want to say trouble, but I did have to adapt because it was a completely different style from the first two movies, Chris Columbus.
Very true.
Right? And completely different style. And of course, sadly, the passing of Richard Harris, we had to change Dumbledore's, which changing an actor is always a shock on me, no matter how good they are.
Yeah,
but of
so
course,
this is a real first real shift in the series, theatrically, anyway.
And some would say it goes darker, but I think it gets even darker as we go to the next.
New director, Alfonso Cuarón, who it's kind of interesting how he wound up with it. It was offered to some different people, including M. Night Shyamalan. Thank God that didn't happen. M. Night Shyamalan was too busy making his masterpiece, The Village. So, people don't need to hear M. Night Shyamalan bash, but not a fan. But and Del Toro, speaking of Mexican directors, I guess I said he'd at least been approached by it, and he said, how we're talking about how this has such a dark shift. The way Del Toro wanted to do it, he said mine would have been such a dark shift that it would have felt completely out of place up against the other two, because he felt like Del Toro himself, who had been a fan of the books. I'm not saying like he didn't like the first two movies or what Columbus did, but he just said personally I would have made it a bit more bleak, and I guess he was like sort of Dickensian, like he might have so that by the time you get to the third, like it's a more gradual shift. And then, like Cuarón said, I haven't even read these books. And Del Toro said something like, well, if you're going to do this, don't be so arrogant. Read the books. So it's cool that Del Toro had said that. But Alfonso Cuarón's a really great director. He has a really interesting body of work. And I don't know. To me, this is just one of those like stars align moments. Like it just seemed like the perfect time for him to do this. I really think it's like great that Chris Columbus did do the first two and establish the world. But I like how now we're in year 3 and things are going to get a bit darker, more serious, more complex. We have this shift. We have a new Dumbledore, which is just happenstance because I like you. I also liked the original Dumbledore better, but Michael Gambon did win me over time. A lot of the usual suspects were floated for him too, including like Ian McKellen, who's just like, I'm already Gandalf. Like, no way, it would be redundant for me to do this. He also said something like, in life, Richard Harris had like insulted him and said, and like at some point, Richard Harris had referred to him in the press as like a dreadful actor or something. He's like, I don't know, so I don't think he'd want me to do it. Richard Harris himself really wanted to be in the third movie. Like he was, even when his health was failing, he was like, don't recast. I want to do it. And, it just didn't work out. He passed away, which is really unfortunate. But like he wanted his friend Peter O'Toole to do it, but I don't think they ever leaned in that direction. I don't know. Anyway, we wound up with Michael Gambon, who, as I said, that was the one jarring thing for me to like. I did like the movie right away, and it's my favorite, but I did need time to adjust to that change. But I had nobody to blame in this instance. It's not like they tossed Richard Harris out. The guy died, so they did what they had to do. So that was the one sort of sticking point for me at the end. And there's one other sticking point, but we won't get into it until the movie actually gets going. But yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, this third book is where I became a fan. I can even remember like the chapter where I basically was like, okay, this is good. It was the chapter the Marauders map was introduced, because I was like, oh, I invented something similar, which is not that original. I'm sure lots of kids came up with that, and I was like, I'm on board for this. Sneaking around and secrets and tunnels, like that was when it really started to work for me. Like I liked both first two books. I thought they were very interesting and cool, but this is where it turned a corner. I was like, oh, I'm like fully into this world now. And that was a big part of it. So this movie introduces a lot of new elements that I think really elevate it and show growth in the story and the characters and all that fun stuff. So is there anything else?
You remind me of my friend Lindsay, who actually this is his favorite book and movie. Last I knew, at least, and he'll come up again in the next couple of movies. But yeah, he was a big Harry Potter fan. He had read all all of them up to this point, and was trying to encourage me to read, which after this movie, that's when I started reading the books. So I read the first 3 books, which I'll repeat again next episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll say it when we do it. The 4th book is my favorite book, but I feel like this is a slightly better adaptation than the adaptation of Goblet of Fire. Although, again, I don't sound like I have big problems with that movie or anything. There's a lot that's good. We're just coming down to the point where the books are starting to get long now, and certain things do get dropped or simplified, and I miss them, even if I understand why they're. But in this movie, like I said, considering the last movie was almost 20 minutes longer than this, I feel like there's some things they could have included that would make things better. And this movie wouldn't even have to be more than 10 minutes longer, I'm sure. And we will get to it when we get to it. But anyway, I keep stepping over what I was going to say before we actually launch into it. Because like, is there something else to say before we actually start this freaking thing? I don't know. But yeah, a lot of new stuff is being thrown at us. We have yet another Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, but this person would be important going forward, even after, not being a teacher anymore. In Lupin, who is my favorite character. That's another reason, too. Lupin's my favorite character in the entire series, so this is his introduction. And obviously the book that he comes up in other books, but this is the book that he features the most prominently in, so that's another big reason. And we'll talk about the acting and casting as we get into it. But I guess now I've already gone on too long before we actually started, so as usual, for people who want to follow along, now or in the future, we'll just do a countdown from 3 and hit play, and hopefully there won't be any bumps, and I'll be like, oh, wait, stop, or go back. Okay. So, and hopefully volume and everything. So if everybody's prepared, we'll do a 3, 2, 1, and then we will all hit play and get this movie started. So a 3, 2, 1, let's go. So here is the old DVD. The last of the DVDs I had. After this, I did start buying Blu-rays, but this is 2005 or so. So, Blu-rays aren't necessarily out. What year was Blu-ray? Like 2007?
This one? No, it's much earlier than that, like 2003 or 4.
No, I mean when Blu-rays were introduced.
Oh, no, you're probably right. 2007 sounds about right. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. So it's a 2-disc widescreen edition when they still made a point of saying that on the old DVDs. So that's the last of these that I own. And eventually we'll get into a story about how I own some of the books and movies come up. So this starts off very much. And here's the original British cover, original Canadian cover. They're the one and the same, with Harry and Hermione on the hippogriff Buckbeak. So right, we open the same way, exactly how it opens this. And so again, I have one of the beautiful, large illustrated editions by Jim Kay. Here's the night bus.
Nice.
And
title screen.
I think this is where they really, title screen. So we're pretty close. We're pretty close to synced up. So this is chapter 1, Owl Post. So here is a close-up shot of Harry doing his homework under the covers. He's not supposed to be doing homework because it's against the Dursleys' rules. There they even show him coming in to check on him. And my most recent thing, I only got this recently, is the other Mina Lima. And this is fabulous. Like, I thought the last one was good. This one is ridiculously good. Again, these are very pricey. I only recommend them if you're a super fan, kind of. But I didn't quite explain what Mina Lima is. Mina Lima is the name of the art studio by 2 different artists. It's combining their names. Miramorpha Mina and Eduardo Lima. So they just took their last names, combined them to make this art studio. But I am really blown away by this one. This one's so good. And here's sort of another thing of Harry under the covers. So they're jumping straight into Aunt Marge. So Owl Post, they basically blow past chapter 1. They don't even start in chapter 1. They have blown past it to the next chapter, Aunt Marge's big mistake. So actually quite a bit of stuff happens before Aunt Marge shows up. Like him getting the letters from Ron and Hermione, talking about what's going on. There's a whole thing that Ron, at the start of the summer, had actually called on the phone, but he didn't know to use the phone because he's an idiot, and you yelled into the phone and got, Verdon really mad, so he knew not to call back. But he got birthday cards and stuff from his friends in the summer. And also Owl Post was Errol, the old family owl of the Weasley family was helped into the place by Harry's own owl Hedwig plus a school owl that was also bringing like the new reading lists and stuff like that. So that's what happens in Owl Post. They have just jumped past this and jumped into Aunt Margaret's big mistake, where, as we see, Dursley's his sister, who's a really mean person and always very critical of Harry, and Harry's gonna flip out here. Again, they're turning her week-long visit into like one evening. They're combining some things, which is not a big deal, except that it does lessen his suffering a little bit. Because actually, when see there, you have the glass implode. Like, Harry does not actually show any emotion in the book when that happens. It's only much later on that he has a blow up. But anyway, they're just condensing things, as often happens, especially when we're doing events before the school, right? It's like, okay, we always cut down stuff, get them to the school is what matters. So I don't have any issue with this per se. We'll see. I've made some notes and now I've lost my place, of course. I had all the time in the world to have this page open in the right place, and I didn't do it. What we got here? Well, that's Chamber Secrets. Sorry, my Chamber Secret notes. Marge's big mistake. Yeah. So the other thing is they actually hear about Sirius Black on the Muggle news. So that's another thing that's not in the movie. Is right off they already hear about him because Black is such a problem that even the Muggles have been, alerted about him, although they don't know what he is, but they do know that he's some dangerous criminal. So just like what happened in the second one, where Dobby makes the cake fall on the person's head, and in the book it's a little less dramatic. The cake just falls on the floor. Same thing here. In the book, she just basically goes up to the ceiling. But here, since that door is open, she's going to go wind. And I don't mind. They're making it bigger, better for the movie. So she's going to go flying up into the sky, which is pretty funny, I have to admit.
Yeah. Like, I saw this for the first time. I again knew we were still along for a fun ride.
I assume this was way too loud now that I have my headphones off. I gotta turn this down. Sorry, people. I'm probably blasting people with my volume. Okay, hopefully that's a little better. I'm sorry. These are really good noise-canceling headphones. So I was just like, that's probably fine. But sorry, people, for watching the first few minutes. That's probably loud and distracting, especially if you're watching your own at the moment. But don't you dare. So that's some funny added stuff where it's like she's just going to float into the sky and die in the upper atmosphere, apparently. In the book, she's just up on the ceiling. But I don't mind. It's fun.
Shout out Daniel Shine.
Flesh Wound features. Glad to see you. But I think I might be showing more of the Minolina this time than the other one because I've just become really impressed. Oh, the other thing is, and this is, okay, so this is a big, I realize that they do eventually show this. Again, they're moving it to when Harry's actually in Diagon Alley and he's with Ron's family. But, here's the newspaper article about how they won the contest and the family went to Egypt, and there's the photograph with everybody. And the key to this is that Scabbers is in the photograph. That's what sets everything off in this. And this is my one complaint about the movie that I'll talk about. And it's more pronounced towards the end when everything goes to hell in the Shrieking Shack, is they are leaving out some extremely important exposition that would take 2 seconds to say. And I don't know why. And I'm not going to put you on the spot about it at this moment. We'll get to it when we get to it. But what I was going to say to you is, like, I know you read the book after seeing the movie, and I know this is going back 20-some years, so I don't know what you're going to remember. But can you remember watching the movie as someone who hadn't read the book and feeling fully satisfied that you understood everything in the end? Because when I watched the movie, as much as I enjoyed it, I was very surprised by things they just did not include that I knew, as someone who read the book, I could fill in the gaps. But I was like, if you haven't read it, how can you make these connections? I don't think you can.
No. So I don't know if you want me to wait for the biggest one that
we'll really get into it. But okay. For me, it's the whole thing in the Shrieking Shack, where they start to reveal things because a bunch of important connections are not said. And to me, again, the movie does not need to be like 10 minutes more longer. It only needs 3 or 4 or 5 minutes tops longer just to put in some extra lines of dialogue. So here he's fled the home and he's going to have his first encounter with the Grim, which actually is Sirius. And you think, how different would the movie be if he hadn't accidentally summoned the night bus? Because at this point, he doesn't know anything about Black at all. As especially in the movie. In the movie, he doesn't even know Black exists yet. In the book, he knows there's somebody named Sirius Black who's escaped, but he has no reason to believe it's a wizard or has anything to do with the wizard world or him. But it looks like Black might have been willing to approach Harry, transform, and explain who he was, and hope Harry believed him. You know, like why would Harry believe him? We don't know. So the Night Bus, again, this is one of the first really cool fold-outs. I'm getting a little better at these. Tissue paper off. So here it is, sort of on its own. But as you can see, I can't do this when I have enough hands. But you can fold back those things and see the compartments inside the bus with, like,
That's awesome.
Various people sleeping in the beds. I'll pull one back just sort of haphazardly, like that. So there
that is very, very cool.
See inside. Yeah. But I mean, the movie gets this very well right too. It looks very good. So one thing they've added, I'm sure people know, is like that, I don't know, Jamaican sounding truck and head. That's not in the book, but why not add it for some flair? In the book, Ernie, the driver, actually does speak. In this, they decide to just have Ernie not speak and concentrate on the road. Because when he's going to have that conversation with Stan about Sirius Black, like, Ernie's actually a part of that conversation in the book. In this, they just leave Ernie out of it, which more or less is okay. It's not a big deal. There's Stan Shunpike, who does show up again in the final book. Take it away, Ern. but that's perfect. I've got too much stuff. Let's see. It looks really good here, too.
Yeah.
As it's described in the book, it's a violently purple bus. It gets kind of what happens to Aunt Marge gets very grotesque in Jim Kay's telling. Like,
yeah, that's kind of.
It looks like she's gonna like burst, like that. She's blown up a bit too much. The night bus pulling up. Very nice.
But honestly, even in this movie, it does almost remind you of like a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade balloon.
Yeah. But they do handle the bus really well in the movie. I like how they get down the frantic movement of the bus and how it jumps in between places and muggles don't see it. They really get that across really well. That's one of the strengths of the movie, is conveying the movement that you can only imagine, reading a book or looking at a picture. They do a really good job. So there he is looking at Sirius Black. So they do have a short conversation about Sirius Black, and this is where he gets filled in that Black is not just some criminal, he's a wizard criminal. And he's connected to Voldemort. Blah, blah, blah. Which is news to Harry at this point in both the book and the movie. So in the book, Ernie is actually part of this too. And at one point, he's like, talk something else about, and he says something like, talk about something else. That Sirius Black gives me the cobby wallows, or wobble collies. One of those weird British sayings. Cobble wobbies, maybe? Cobble wobbies? I don't know. He's saying gives him the creaks, but But yeah, the Daily Prophet article. But yeah, him I've heard of. Plus, there's some added stuff too, like where actually he says, like, I'll go to the Leaky Cauldron that's in London. Oh, you hear that? The Leaky Cauldron is in London. This obviously is not in the book, but it's a cool little visual thing, showing how the night bus can adapt to these situations. So I mean, that's how all the movies share this. They have prolonged action sequences that are either not in the book or are just much shorter in the book, but you take advantage of it. We're going to see the same thing when he meets, I just want to say, Buckwheat, the famous Eddie Murphy character from Saturday Night Live. No, Buckbeak. When he goes for the little flight on Buckbeak, it's actually quite short and simple in the book, and they expand it for the movie. And again, why not? It looks good. It's fun. All right. So they do mention that Hedwig flew on ahead and found him, because in this world, owls just have a way of finding people, which always makes me think, why don't you send the owls after Black? Couldn't an owl find Black if the whole Ministry of Magic can't find him? The owls seem to always know where people are. I like that wizard's reading A Brief History of Time. It's just a movie joke. I actually don't like that in this, how they draw Fudge. They give him a beard. I'm like, not everybody needs a goddamn beard. They also give Lupin a bit of a goatee, which I don't like either. It's like, too many people have beards already. and we'll get to it when we get to it. And I already talked about it even before Lupin ever showed up in the other movies because he's my favorite character. I said Lupin, and we'll talk about it more when he actually shows up. He's an example of like my own brain not actually coming up with a character that really looks like the way he's described. So I can't complain because the movie's probably closer to what I only thought of, but I can't help but think of Lupin the way I picture him. But I like this actor so much that it doesn't bother me. I really do like his portrayal. So it's like, to me, there's kind of like two Lupins in my head. Movie Lupin and Book Lupin, even though Book Lupin is not really Book Lupin. It's just something I made up at some point and couldn't get past. My Lupin is clean shaven, looks a bit younger, and has hair, maybe face length hair. I don't know why. It's just how it always has been for me.
I've probably said it before and I'll say it again, and that's why one main reason why I watch the movies and then read the book. I mean, first and foremost, because I'm more of a movie buff, but it's just that if they are so different, hearing people like, oh man, this was changed. And it did help because this is what I thought Lupin looked like. So even if it said something different in the book, I could quickly move past that and still picture.
Well, as I said, everyone like the casting is usually very good. And even in places where it's not exactly appropriate, like again, like people like Sirius, people like Snape, like they should be a lot younger. But we like those actors a lot, so we don't really, let it bother us too much. I get that. But then there's things like Slughorn, who is completely different in the movie than the way he's described in the book. But again, I like the actor so much. I really like what he does. Lupin to me is a weird oddity because I'm not saying, oh, they didn't cast him the way he's the book. They just didn't cast him in the way that I independently thought of him for some reason, which was actually kind of in spite of the book. Because again, he's not described the way I think of him. I don't know. Just sometimes you do that when you're reading a book, right?
When you're reading a book, you create your own character or how they look. And even if it is descriptive in the book, you still have your own picture.
Here they moved the monster book that Hagrid sent him. Again, he had this back at the house first. They're just moving the scene, which is fine. It's no big deal. Let's see if we can open it up, get its teeth showing. Kind of like that, Arr. Book eat you.
Now the Leaky Cauldron, a lot of places look different from the last movie, and it did take me. Yeah, it was a jerk.
I think for most people, the only thing they really noticed was the big one, which was like Hagrid's
hut.
Cabin is in a different place and it's bigger. I mean, they changed multiple places. This is the first one to use actual locations, too. The first two movies are pretty much entirely built sets. This movie does use some, like, locations, like, specifically, like, near and around the lake, various Scottish lakes and things like that. And there's a few repurposed things, too, like when we see, they do a pretty good job of Trelawney's classroom. That's actually the same classroom, I think, as the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. They just dress it up to make it look different. So that's interesting, too. So she's just running around and has a cat now, which I think is unfortunate. See, that's a scene I wish they could have had. And again, I know they don't want to have too many scenes before you get to Hogwarts, right? It's all about Hogwarts. You can't have too many scenes before you get to Hogwarts. But the fact is, they go to a pet store called the Magical Menagerie, and she wants an owl originally, but then she just winds up really liking Crookshanks. But this is just a beautiful shot of the Magical Menagerie. And Ron goes in because he notices that Scabbers is feeling ill, and he wants to see if he can get some medicine for Scabbers. We know now why Scabbers is like this. Scabbers is very nervous because suddenly the one guy that knows his secret is out running around loose. That's why Scabbers is upset, because he's Peter Pettigrew. Spoilers, people. But this is beautiful. You can't see enough of it, but like literally everything that's described on the page is in here. It's like a thing.
Now that you said that, I remember reading that. Pet shop.
Black rats skipping their tails, enormous like purple toads, a big jeweled tortoise. I know this is small, but like that's all in here. So that's what happens here. And actually, Crookshanks is extremely important. So what's also funny is around the exact same time this movie came out. I mean, so it was even before the movie came out, I think. It was around. It didn't matter because either way, the book would have existed. But I was living in my first apartment, which would have started at the I guess, fall of 2004. So, I guess around the time of this. Yeah. So, I guess I'm in my third year. So, I'm in my third year of college. My first real apartment. It's the first floor of a flat, this nice house on neighborhood not too far even from where I am now. and I lived there with my sister and my previous college roommate. And we had some rowdy Australians that lived above us. That wasn't too fun, but you get what you get. But anyway, that neighborhood had a cat that looked pretty much exactly like that would come in and we would feed it sometimes. Some woman told us it was 19 years old, but it was a very burly looking cat, same colors. I don't think it quite had the squash face, but anyway, we named him Crookshanks after this character. But I just remember, we asked, what's his name? She's like, I don't know if anybody ever named him. He's just been around all this time. So obviously he's been dead for a long time. But he was 19 when we met him. He was ungrateful, too, because we would let him in sometimes. We didn't have cat food back then. This was before I had cats. So sometimes we'd give him a can of tuna. He'd kind of eat some of it, and then he'd just sort of slobber the rest on the floor, and then he'd just walk out. And sometimes when he came, he didn't even want us. He wanted the Australians, because how it works was, you open up the door and there's a porch. So then there's our door, and then there's a door to the stairs leading up to the other one. Half the time he wanted to go up there. Apparently they gave him better food, I guess. We're like, you ingrate? So he didn't even want to bother with us half the time. So I've talked over it, but now he knows that Black specifically is after him. He wasn't supposed to know that, but Ron's dad did want to tell him, and he overheard, that it's not just dangerous that Black's out, but Black is specifically after Harry, and that's what he's going to tell them. So also we're going to come to another thing here that happens a lot. I mentioned in the first two is what they'll do for a lot of scenes is minimize the amount of characters in a scene. If a character is not important to a scene, they usually take them out. As I said, this happens to Neville all the time. Often Neville's with them for things and they just cut it out. It's going to happen here too. So this is all in the book. They get further. It's very dark and rainy. But the part when they stop and all the lights go up for a second, Ginny and Neville show up. And so they're actually present for the first encounter of the Dementor, but that doesn't happen here. Again, I don't care. They're just simplifying things. Also, I don't know if they're going to have Malfoy show up, because actually Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle do show up very briefly too. See that there's a teacher and leave, even though he's asleep because they know I'm in trouble. And that's the other thing we'll get to is that I can't remember who's Crabbe and who's Goyle, but we all remember one of those guys, the actor was sick or something, so he's not in the movie. So they just replaced them with some other guy. I can remember feeling that was really jarring because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, Goyle's missing, or possibly Crabbe. I don't remember who's who, but
I always forgot who's who.
And he does return. He comes back for later movies, but for some reason, I guess he was sick. Maybe I can't remember. You can probably find out the info somewhere, but he must have been sick or something because he's not in this movie, and they just add some random Slytherin to the scene that you never see again just to take his place. And I get it, most people aren't going to know. But this is all very cool, showing the cold, which is nice. But yeah, Ginny and Neville actually show up when all the lights go out. But it's not going to happen here.
I kind of remember Neville being in there in the book. And like you said, I think a few places throughout the series that they take him out in the movies.
Yeah. So, the Leaky Cauldron was a whole chapter 5, because the whole thing was, Harry actually spends a week on his own, and it's, a wonderful time of freedom. He never had this kind of freedom in his life. He's not allowed to leave the area, but he doesn't mind, and, the Olds are sort of keeping an eye on him. But he goes around, going into and he has all this wonderful freedom. And that's where he first sees the firebolt, which comes in later. They don't mention the firebolt in this, so you see it. This, he actually sees the firebolt and visits it every day just to stare at it. He already has a broom, but it's oh, firebolt, amazing racing broom. So let's get to our Dementors.
These are cool.
And I think, again, this just comes from being genre savvy. Well, yes, I'm not saying the Dementors rip anything off. I instantly grasped how they worked and what they meant. I'm not trying to say I'm smarter than anybody. I'm not even saying anybody was confused. But I just mean it took me 2 seconds to put together why Harry was more affected by them than other people. I didn't need to wait for Lupin to explain. It's oh, Harry has past trauma. And obviously, So I don't know if other people that it occurred to them or not. But
no.
Here's some Dementors inside and outside the chamber. Yeah. But I'm not I'm so smart. It just comes from a genre savviness. The idea of a monster that can feed on your happiness or bring up your worst moments. I can't think of a specific example, but they're around. They existed before Dementors. I'm not saying Dementors are lazy or anything. They're cool. I'm just saying it's not 100% 100% unique thing. There's even little small ones in the margins that are a lot better than last season. There they are in the horseless carriage pulling up to the gates with some Dementors around it. Also, I noticed in reading the book that you know how it's not till the 5th book that you find out about the Thestrals?
Yeah.
I don't know if they've been decided that like they existed at this point or not, but when in the scene where Harry and they're getting into it, and from Harry's point of view, it says something like he figured they were pulled by invisible horses, which is like just a guess. So it's interesting. So I don't know if that idea was there all along. We talked about this before too. There's a few things that happen in this movie that suggest like stuff that shows up by the 4th book had not been thought of yet. And we'll get to it when we're there. But there he is, you know. So no one was screaming Harry. There's Hermione taking Ron's lines again. This is the movie where things get really bad, where Hermione is just stealing all Ron's moments, where Ron doesn't contribute anything useful because it's always somebody else saying his lines. It gets bad. This is a fun thing with the choir. Not in the book, but it's fun. Yeah. So for the second year, they're going to miss or Harry will miss the sorting. Harry and Ron missed the sorting last year because they crashed into the Whomping Willow, taking the thing. This time, Harry and Hermione missed the sorting because they get called into McGonagall's office. Harry's to see if he's okay after what happened with the Dementor, and Hermione to talk about her timetable, which we all know what that means. But this is a nice little added thing from the movie, this choir with Toads and Professor Flitwick. Something wicked this way comes. Ooh, classic.
It was used in a lot of promotional material, if I recall.
Right, so here's our brand new Dumbledore. About to give his annual "The students are in grave danger" speech. Every year he has something to tell them about why we're all in danger. This year it's an escaped crazed convict. So we've got bloodthirsty Dementors running around. You know, there's always, every year part of his speech is to tell people like why like danger's happening. So there's Lupin being properly introduced. That's why he knew to give you the chocolate. Okay. So this is after the sorting. So this just skips over the sorting. So in the movie thing, you might assume that Harry saw the sorting. It's not important, but technically he and Hermione missed the sorting. Because another thing, for the first 3 books, not counting like the very start of the first book, everything is Harry's point of view. And that's something that changes from the movies too. Every chapter, everything we see is Harry's point of view, or at least Harry's in the vicinity. Like in the first movie, in the first book, there's a very quick aside while Harry's playing Quidditch that shows us Hermione and Ron's point of view, you know, when they think Snape's attacking him and, you know, Quirrell and the fire and all that stuff. Like that's the only quick aside. Everything else is basically from Harry's point of view, except for the very first part of the first book because he's a baby. And then we see stuff actually from Uncle Vernon's point of view for a while. Then we get the scene of, you know, the Dumbledore and McGonagall talking about Harry and what his life's going to be. After that, everything in the book is Harry's point of view. There's no meanwhile. There's no, oh, here's what some other people are doing. So the movies are different from that. They will sometimes show stuff he's not present for, which, you know, is a nice change of pace. And that's why the opening of the 4th book was so interesting to fans, because the opening of the 4th book is not Harry for the first time. It opens with that caretaker guy that winds up, you know, getting killed by
yes,
Voldemort and Wormtongue and everything. You know, so that's the first time that happens in the books is we open and it's not Harry, it's not anybody related to Harry. And then the books do start to move around a bit, but as a rule, the books are written from Harry's point of view. So one thing that happens here is there's a part where Harry's not in Hogsmeade, but it shows Ron and Hermione and what they're up to in Hogsmeade. Like that's not in the book. There's no meanwhile, here's Ron and Hermione. So here's one of my favorite things that I don't mind at all. Okay, so there's the fat lady, right? She is the guardian for the common room for Gryffindor. You have to give the fat lady the password to get into it. And that's a plot point in this one. It's not really a plot point in the other ones. It's a Fortuna Major, as they're going to say here. But there's a really fun part of this book that I totally get why it's not in the movie. It's not a criticism, but I miss, is that on their first day when they're trying to go to divination, it's their first time ever going there. It's in the North Tower, and they've never been there. Harry, Ron, and Hermione become lost. And then one of the paintings, who is this small, dumb-looking knight named Sir Cadogan, starts trying to fight them. And they're like, shut up. And then they say, how are we going to get there? But then he's like, I'll show you the way. And it's another thing to remind us. All the paintings are connected. People in the paintings can visit each other. but it's you can't teleport. You have to go through them physically. So if one's next to another, you pass through them. So Sir Cadogan leads them to North Tower by going from painting to painting and showing them the way. Sir Cadogan becomes important later, and I'll point it out later. But here, this is hard to see. But this is basically their route with Sir Cadogan, and it's too small to see. But he's actually popping up in these paintings to show them the way to go to get to divination. And Sir Cadogan does actually play a role going forward that, again, is not in the book, not in the movie. I don't mind. That's one of the things I can live with the cut. But it's one of the more amusing things, because Sir Cadogan's like this failed knight. It's always falling off his horse and making an idiot of himself, and always like challenging people to duels and stuff. And he does actually play a role going forward, and we'll get there when we get there. But that I can live with. So what are they going to open with here? I guess they're just going to remind us that the Weeping Willow's around. Because this is our first look at the different grounds. There's a little Stonehenge area, and we see that Harry. So it's like, oh yeah, the Weeping Willow's still around. It's going to kill this bird. Isn't that funny? Whomping Willow. I said Weeping Willow. That's not a Weeping Willow. It's a Whomping Willow. Right, so this is a small thing too, because it looks fine on the inside, but I do like the geography of the castle. I like to know that this is at the top of a tower. The only way you can get to it is after you have to go up a spiral staircase, and on the top of the spiral staircase is a very small landing. And then to get to her, there's a trap door in the ceiling, and she throws down a rope. You actually have to climb a rope ladder. You have to climb a ladder to get into her class, which I thought was cool. And I get why they don't show it, because it's not important, and logistically it would be kind of too much work. But I do like the geography of Hogwarts, and I like knowing that. I like knowing that they're the very top of the tower, and the only way to access her area. Also, I get it because they have to film it. Like, there's too much light. Like, this is way too well lit. It should be much darker. But
I did feel like they made it sort of the attic space of Hogwarts as far as the classroom goes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the classroom looks like, the layout's fine. The layout's good, but yeah, there shouldn't be stairway there. But they're at the very top of North Tower. This is a good one. This is showing the Grim So it looks like this here. But if you move the spoon, you can reveal something.
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. The Grim. So they also, we're skipping it, they are showing that like Hermione seems to be disappearing and reappearing all the time, and they can't figure out how it's happening. But another thing that I harp on in this, and I know I talked about the other things, is I like knowing the relationships of the students. And it's because they have to focus so much on Harry and his group, we don't see as much of it. This is where the first book, where we find out that like Lavender and Parvati are like really good friends. They're also, not only are they really good friends, but they become obsessed with Trelawney. They think she's like a genius, and they like listen to her all the time. So if that's supposed to be Dean, he doesn't look like that in any other movies. The black kid, right? Dean is completely different by the time you get to like the sixth one. But anyway, because they're gonna have like Dean say this whole thing about like Black being sighted. It's a completely different scene in the book where he just basically says, "Oh, did you hear?" But in this, they make it. He goes like, "He's been sighted. He's been sighted." And it kind of comes off kind of goofy and silly. But here's another thing, like I guess the effects budget, right? Like Hagrid has like a whole herd of hippogriffs. There's like 12 of them, but they're like, we can't animate all that. So like, so Buckbeak I think is the only one we see, but actually there's a whole bunch of them. But simplifying, right? It's like the effects budget can't handle like 12 completely different color, brightly colored hippogriffs. It's like we'll just do one, because technically, yeah, you don't need the others, but
it makes it more personal with just the one with Buckbeak.
I suppose. I mean, it's still the same in that Buckbeak is the one that gets partnered up with Malfoy, leading to the injury. So no complaints here. This is, of course, they need to do it anyway because it's an important plot point. But people already heard me complain. I don't like them stuffing the Slytherins into scenes they're not there for. Technically, in the books, this is only the second time that they've ever had a class with the Slytherins. Since first year, the Gryffindors of that year have always shared potions with Slytherins. Apart from that, they don't have any other classes. This is the first time they've shared. See, Who is that?
That is Crabbe and Goyle.
Yeah, but one of them is going to disappear throughout later in the movie. You're right. I think I said he wasn't in the movie at all. He is,
and one of them's there earlier too. Or
yeah,
I mean, one of them's not there earlier. Scene.
Yeah, one of them's gonna disappear. I can't remember which one. And just get replaced. Like when they do some Hogsmeade scenes, like suddenly there's only one of them and there's just some other guy there. Which isn't like too jarring because it's like, well, he knows other Slytherins. He doesn't always have to be with them. But yeah, but later, when they're going to do the defense against the dark arts class, once again, like Malfoy and the Slytherins are going to be there. And I really think that's wrong. I think that throws off the whole vibe of the scene. The whole point is everybody's enjoying it. But when he's like, ridiculous. And Malfoy's like, this class is ridiculous. Like, no, it's just the Gryffindors having a good time. There's no Slytherins there shitting on poor Lupin. So I get, like, people are like, you sound like a crazy person. I know, I guess I am. But to me, it changes the vibe of the scene if you're throwing different characters in. So here's two changes that are really interesting, too. So Harry in the book is way more proactive. And I like one change in the movie, and I don't like the other. I don't like this first change. Because the first one, he says, who will do it? In the movie, as we see, everybody takes a step back, and he thinks Harry has volunteered. In the book, Harry literally does volunteer. And I think they should have kept that because Harry's trying to help Hagrid. But I like the other change in that he says, I think he'll let you ride you now. In the book, Harry, once again, is more proactive and actually gets on his back. I do like the change that Hagrid just dumps him on, like, without warning. So I wish they had kept the first one, but I like the second one. I like that Hagrid's just like, oh, okay, here you go, and just drops him on. I do like that. But I do think Harry should have volunteered. But it's a very small thing. So, yeah.
It is, but I get you because he's supporting Hagrid is the biggest.
Yeah, he's supporting Hagrid. But I do like this change. Like in the book, he's just like, I think I'll let you ride him now. So Harry, he is reluctant, but he does like climb on. I like that Hagrid's just like, oh, off you go, and just dumps him on him. It's pretty funny. Yeah, that skinny guy there. If you saw that part with him with the apple, that skinny guy is going to take one of Crabbe and Goyle's places, like in other scenes in the movie. It's not like a complaint. It's just something that happens. Oh, they're trying to show some tension between Ron and Hermione. It wasn't in the book, but that's okay. Shipping. Everybody loves shipping.
There's Dean behind him.
Yeah. So Dean, they definitely recast. I don't think they used him again.
No, that's not the guy we saw in the previous scene. I think that's the original Dean behind him. That was in the first and is in the later movie. Yeah, see? It's really quick. Yeah.
But I mean, he has a couple lines, this heavier looking guy. I don't know if it's supposed to be Dean or not, right? He has the line about the Grim, and later when he's going to talk about, like, they said they're going to be in a different place. He's going to be like, he's been sighted. He's like, how are you going to catch black? It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare, like that's just added. It's not in the book. They do talk about him being sighted, but they don't make it quite that dramatic. Yeah. So this is good. This is fun. In the book, they just take a little fly around the paddock. This, he's going over the whole school grounds, the towers, the lake. Why not? It's a movie. You do take advantage of that. That is a good change for sure. The castle is like 40% bigger than what we've seen in the other movies. They really expanded it. Again, this movie is like doing world building and literal world building, which again, I think is why I think it's the best movie. It takes us a little further in. But yeah, that's pretty cool. It's nice to show Harry does eventually start to enjoy it. Because at first he's freaked out because it's like, when I'm on a broom, I can control it. But here, I have no idea what's happening. But, it's like, this is pretty cool. Yeah, so this cover echoes the original cover in that it's got Harry and Hermione on Buckbeak going to rescue Sirius. See if we can get a shot of. So here's the paddock with the different hippogriffs of all different colors. There's 6 that we can see, and then there's 6 more in the background. So technically, it's a herd of 12. Harry and Buckbeak bowing to each other.
See there again, I think I'm glad they kept it at just Buckbeak and this color, hippogriff.
I mean, I would have liked to have seen others. Buckbeak is the one that matters. He's the one that Harry rides, and he is the one that injures Malfoy. The others don't really do anything, but I do think, it makes sense that he would have more than one, especially if he was going to teach a class, right? Because the whole idea is he splits everybody off into groups to each, pair up with this. In this, Malfoy just they make him more of a jerk, which is fine because Malfoy sucks, right? Like Malfoy just is not even asked. In the book, he's actually paired up with Buckbeak. He's supposed to be doing it. And this, Malfoy's just like, well, Harry can do it, I can do it, and just zooms up. The thing is, Malfoy actually follows instructions at first. He does bow to Buckbeak and is able to pat him, but then he says something like, this thing's stupid and an ugly brute, and Buckbeak understands English, so that's why he attacks him. Uh-huh. Same shot as in the movie, but Malfoy being carried by Hagrid. Where we are in the other book. Good shot of our cat, Crookshanks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we get to see some of the ghosts. Like maybe that's supposed to remind us of Sir Cadogan. It's like a little cameo. It's like we couldn't do Sir Cadogan, but here's some ghost knights because I know Sir Cadogan's not a ghost; he's a portrait. But I think what's funny too is how the Shrieking Shack's a big deal, and when Hermione talks about in Hogsmeade, the Shrieking Shack is supposed to be the most haunted building in Britain. I'm like, more haunted than Hogwarts? Hogwarts is crawling with ghosts. Why would anybody care about the Shrieking Shack? It's like ghosts are all over this freaking place. Yeah, here it is. He's been sighted. Yeah, so this is a more heavy set, excitable Dean than we would see later on. And there's Seamus. That could be anywhere. In the book, they're a lot less concerned about Black. In this, they're all kind of freaked out about it. I don't mind that they do that wild look for him there, but in later movies, I hate that. If you want to talk about casting and character changes I don't like, it's definitely Bellatrix Lestrange. There's no point in getting into it now because we'll get to it when she's actually introduced, but I think that's one of the big, big misses. I think it's bad casting. It's bad writing. They just completely overhaul the character for no reason. I don't know if it's because the actress, if Helena Bonham Carter thought it was better or if it was the director's idea or what. This is a small thing too, but this is technically not in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, which wouldn't be big enough. This is the staff room, which I guess is like Teacher's Lounge. But yeah, I really don't like that the Slytherins are here. They should not be here. It should just be the Gryffindors having a good time. There shouldn't be any sarcastic, snarky Slytherins hanging out in the background, ruining the vibe. The Boggart, we're at Chapter 7, The Boggart in the Wardrobe. Aptly named. So they're skipping over a whole potions class scene. It's not that important. It's just a scene that basically shows what a dick Snape can be. And the fact that since Malfoy's faking his injury, he makes Ron and people cut up his ingredients for him. Here we see the wardrobe in question. Just looks like an ordinary wardrobe.
Until
this is a harder one to do, so I don't want to bend it too far, but you can sort of see Snape lurking there, right? Snape's I'm a vampire kind of thing. And if I pull this a little, now it's Mrs. Snape in his frizzy grandmother costume. Yeah, it's a little hard to see.
That is neat. No, you can see it. This is a great scene.
Yeah, I like that they add, he puts on, some music to add to the vibe. That's not the book. It's cool, though. He's like, all right, we're going to do this. Let's put on some cool, it's swing music, which is pretty funny. But this is exactly the same. The whole thing, telling Neville, how to visualize and, what to do about it. Have Snape show up. Now, we're going to talk about, we're going to get to all those points where, people get guilty, and I'm going to be guilty, you could say, of, when you tear apart certain things in Harry Potter, it's because you're taking it a bit too seriously and not understanding the world it's in and the tone and stuff like that. But the book and movie both sort of prove it's right. Because, okay, these people are taking on their fears. They're all 12 or 13 years old. Yeah, see, I don't like that there's Slytherins pushing. It's stupid. But the thing is, the whole idea is their fears are kind of stupid, right? That's why you can do this as a teacher. It's considered more or less acceptable because their fears are dumb. It's like, I'm afraid of a spider. Not that these things aren't dangerous, but it's like, I'm afraid of a mummy. Seamus is Irish, so he's actually afraid of a banshee. They don't have it here, but stuff like that. And of course, the whole thing is he ends the class and doesn't let Harry go. And he says, I thought because you've had real trauma and you've actually encountered Voldemort, you might see Voldemort, and that would be really bad for you and the class, right? So it shows he's being somewhat responsible in that. But you have to think that in real life, there'd be at least a couple other people with very valid fears also caused by trauma. So you couldn't really do it, right? Because if you're in a one-on-one situation with like a psychiatrist, that's a controlled environment and it's private. I would never take part in this class. I'd be like, no way. I'm not going to let people see what my deepest fear is. It might be something really embarrassing or humiliating or something that brings up, some sort of tortured thing. Imagine like one of these people had been like molested by a relative when they were younger, and suddenly like their creepy uncle comes out of the closet there. It's like, what? And again, people are like, don't apply that shit to this world. But you're wrong, because they're saying, one, he has the whole moon thing, which is a very real thing, and Harry has the whole Dementor/Voldemort thing, which is very. And I'll take it one step further. In the 5th book, and it's cut out of the movie because again they're moving things along. When they are at Grimmauld Place, they're all before the in the summer before the school year starts, and they're all at Grimmauld Place with the Order of the Phoenix, and it's the Black's house, right? It's the Black's place, and it's filthy. And one of the things they're trying to do is clean the place up because 1, it's filthy, and 2, it's infested with creatures. One of the things that's in there is a Bogart, and somebody says, "Oh, okay, we can take care of that for you." Because Molly had found it, Ron's mother. But she's like, no, I'll find it. Then there's a scene where Harry is by himself, hears Ron's mother sobbing uncontrollably, realizes that she's trying to fight the Bogart and can't do it because the Bogart keeps transforming into dead versions of her family. So don't say that I'm bringing in something dark and inappropriate by it, because it exists in this world. This Bogart is tearing apart her psyche and her emotions by showing her dead family members, because that's her biggest fear, right? So if I'm saying like, oh, somebody could have been molested or had some sort of abuse or something, like that's not completely off the mark. It would actually fit into this world that we are seeing. But anyway, in this, it's all in good fun, except
it's heavy. Yeah.
But it's not in the movies, right? Like, there's no scene of her doing that. But in the book, it's there. Like, it keeps turning into, like, dead versions of her family. And then finally, I think Sirius comes in and gets rid of her for her. And she's, like, emotionally shattered, as somebody would be. Okay, so they're speeding things up here a bit again. This is during a Hogsmeade weekend. In this, they're making it seem like it doesn't happen. That's why they're alone. I don't mind that they moved this outside, but technically this is supposed to be in his office. Because this makes it seem like they've already got some rapport and hang out all the time, which is weird because it's the first time we see them alone together. But if you see it like this, you think, oh, they've got a rapport and they hang out. Like, no, the whole thing is like Harry didn't have anything to do when everybody else went to Hogsmeade, and he just sort of blundered into him. And he's like, want to come into my office and have some tea? So I don't mind that this isn't in the office, but the way they jump and they don't have it be the first Hogsmeade thing makes it seem like it's just a normal thing that he and Harry hang out, but it's not.
Thinking maybe if he it's not really relevant, but if they had opened rather than them two already standing there together talking, like if he walked up on him, and
they also don't talk about his mother this early either. It's just way too early for him to be telling him that he knew his mom. It's actually pretty far into the book before you find out that he knew Harry's parents at all. The only thing that's really given away early in the book is he mentions that the Whomping Willow was planted the year he arrived at Hogwarts. Then you find out later it was planted because of him to protect the secret tunnel. But here they're giving away information early. And I know why they're doing it, because there's certain scenes that, again, they're just cutting. But it feels weird that it's not even Christmas and he's already said all this stuff to Harry. To me, you're mixing up the pacing. It seems like he and Harry are like close, like instantly, which I don't like. I liked it in the book. It actually takes a while. They have multiple conversations and different things happen. In this, he's just like, yeah, Harry Everby talks to Harry because he's the golden special one. Right, so we're at Flight of the Fat Lady. So this is where Sir Cadogan comes in again. Sirius Black, who they think is looking for Harry, but is actually looking for Scabbers, who is Pettigrew, tried to get into the Gryffindor common room to go into the dorms and kill him. The fat lady wouldn't let him in, so he attacks her with a knife, and she takes off. Peeves doesn't exist in the movies, so they have the fat lady show up. But in the book, she's gone. She's scared, she's terrified, she took off. So Peeves is the one that tells Dumbledore what happened, which is too bad. But the thing is, they don't do it in the movie. But in the book, she's so scared that she won't come back. And that's where Sir Cadogan comes in. None of the other people in the paintings want to do it because they're afraid. But Sir Cadogan's crazy, so they let him do it. And this causes two things. One, Sir Cadogan constantly thinks he should like fight duels with people, and two, he's constantly changing the passwords. He changes them like twice a day, and he makes them super complicated, and he just drives everybody insane. And I get you don't need that in the movie, but it is a funny little bit that goes on in the book that like, and that's one of the reasons why Neville fucks up so badly with the passwords. Like in the movie, they make it seem like Neville is just so dumb he can't remember a password, but no, it's because Sir Cadogan is rapidly changing the passwords twice daily. And that's why eventually he writes down the passwords, and that's why, you know, that gets found. But in this, it's just like, Neville, you dumb shit, writing down the passwords. In the book, it makes a little more sense because Sir Cadogan is crazy and keeps changing them. But yeah, I just really like Sir Cadogan. He's funny in the book. He's a good bit of comedic relief. And I'm not saying you need him in the movie, although it does explain Neville's fuck up a little bit. Acres of Movies is doing a weird pitch for a Bill Pullman. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of Bill Pullman's age and how old he'd be at the time of these movies. I don't know. It's hard to say. And if it's a British accent, he's one of the British characters. I mean, not any of the main characters. Like, I'm not putting Bill Pullman in as any of the teachers or anything like that. That's for sure.
Well, because
I mean, it's nothing against Bill Pullman. I've never had. I constantly mix him up with Bill Paxton. You know, it's Bill Pullman was in Independence Day, and his best movie is probably A Simple Plan. That's Bill Pullman, right? No, that's Paxton in A Simple Plan, isn't it? See, I just did it. I literally just did it. I know Bill Pullman's in things. I have to say, Akers, you brought up an actor that I am super indifferent to. Like, I have no problems with Bill Pullman. It's just like I've never in my life thought, oh, Bill Pullman, he did a great job, or I wish he was in this. So I don't feel like the Harry Potter world needed Bill Pullman.
You couldn't recast any of the major roles anyway with me at this point. No. They're such established.
So, like, yeah, if you put it in there, it'd have to be somebody minor. Right. So that's the same. They all have their little sleepover. Again, something that's happening in the background, and you hear it, but it's more prevalent in the books, is the fact that Percy is head boy. There is a part, like, I talked through it, but when they're going up to see what the holdup at the portrait was, it's from the book, too. And Percy's trying to get through the crowd. He's like, excuse me, I'm head boy. Like, it's important. You should get out of my way. And this is true, too. Now Snape is filling in for the absent Lupin. I do like that he says, turn to page 394, which is the exact page number. So here is, once again, a real assassination of Ron's character. They are going to do unforgivable things to Ron here. Like, again, and this is one of the things, like, we've talked about it before, I can't remember the screenwriter's name, but he likes Hermione so much that he constantly gives, like, Ron's good lines to her. But in this one, this isn't even to help Hermione. It's just to make Ron look awful. Right? So he's going to start on this whole thing about teaching them about werewolves. And like, werewolves? We weren't learning anything about werewolves. And he's being a dick. He's like, answer me these questions about werewolves. And like, we haven't covered werewolves. And he's like, you guys suck. Right? So, but of course, Hermione, knowing what she knows, wants to answer the question. And Snape's an asshole. It won't let her. So let's let this play out. You know, what's the difference between an animagus and a werewolf? Actually, the movie's giving us a hint there by mentioning animagus. It's not actually brought up in the book. He just says a common wolf and a werewolf. So they're dropping us a little hint here that animaguses are a thing, and we should keep that in mind. More well lit. I mean, this movie is known for being a lot less well lit than the other ones, but it's to fit the vibe, the shadowy, darker sort of. There's a lot of weird camera angles and wide angle lens, and there's less. See that? There it is. Did you see it? He called her like an insufferable know-it-all, and Ron leans over to Harry and goes, "He's got a point, you know." That makes Ron look like the biggest asshole in the world. You know what he does in the book? He stands up and yells at Snape and gets himself suspended. He says, "Why did you ask that question? She answered your question. Why would you do that if you didn't want an answer?" And so it was detention. So Ron, in a great moment, standing up for his friend. In this, they make him a total dick. Not only does he not protect Snape, he takes Snape's side. Why? Why do that to Ron? It makes him look like such a dick to have him saying, "Oh, he's got a point, you know," when he's bullying our friend. Like, I don't get it. Because like I said, I think the screenwriter, it's not just like he liked Hermione. I think he really, really didn't like Ron. Like, why assassinate his character like that? Like, that's a big, important moment for Ron. And not only do they remove it, they reverse it. Like, Ron's like, "Yeah, Snape's right. I'm on Snape's side." Like, that's awful. So another thing, this is against Hufflepuff, and Cedric Diggory is a mentioned character at this point. So he should be going up against Cedric Diggory as Seeker, but we see absolutely that it's not. Because we're going to see them climb high, and we're going to see that it's obviously a completely different... They're going to start climbing, and, one of them drops out. The other Seeker drops out. It's not Cedric. So Cedric, at this point, has been introduced as a character, and we know for a fact that he is the Hufflepuff Seeker. And we also know for a fact, seeing that is not Cedric. Or you could say that is Cedric, and then they recast him. In any case, Cedric did not get hit by like a bolt of lightning and flame out. I just like that, sometimes a book introduces a brand new character, but I like that sometimes, these characters are introduced earlier. And Cedric's a good example. Same thing with Cho. The exact same thing is going to happen with Cho. Cho is the Ravenclaw Seeker, and Harry takes note of her and that she's pretty and stuff. And what's also interesting is because they lose this match to Hufflepuff, the only way they can stay in the race for the cup is if Hufflepuff can then lose to Ravenclaw, and they do. And there's nothing like describing the match except they say that Ravenclaw like stomps them. So it's pretty funny to think that Cho's team destroyed Cedric going head to head as Seekers, because that's one thing that bound all three of them together in their little love triangle, is that they were all Seekers. And it looks like Cedric's the worst one. I mean, Cedric does win here, but we know why he wins. And they even point out that Cedric's well-liked and honorable, because when, he's going to win here because Harry's going to flame out because of the Dementors. And he's told in the hospital wing when he wakes up, like George and Fred say, like, "Oh, Cedric wanted a do-over because he knew it wasn't fair." And then later in the fourth book, as we get to know Cedric, we know like he's uncomfortable with like how his father brags about him, because his father says like, "Oh, my boy, he once beat Harry Potter." He's like, "Dad, Harry, that was extenuating circumstances." Like, he's really uncomfortable with it. So I do like that those things are set up in the books. It doesn't happen here. It's not a big deal, but it would have been cool to at least mention Cedric instead of having him just come out of the blue. But it's no big deal. But yeah. So I always found it interesting that off page and off screen, like Cedric and Cho went head to head and Cho beat him. But we don't get to see it. Even though we do get a bit of Harry going against Cho, Cho isn't written that well, though, because it makes it seem like she's not much of a seeker, that she's more of a seeker by default. And her whole strategy for trying to beat Harry is just shadowing him. And I was like, that's kind of lame, but, no big deal. So two things as far as Quidditch goes. We said Quidditch gets less important as the movies go, as the books go. But one is, this is the first time they've lost a match with Harry. And two is, obviously, they didn't win the first two cups because of the absence of Harry in the first one. And in the second one, the final was canceled because of the Chamber of Secrets danger. So this is his third year, and it's the last year of his original team. After this, their captain, Wood, he's in his seventh year. This is the final year. So he's desperate for them to win. And this is the year they finally win. It's spoilers, although I don't even know if they show it in the movie. So there they are walking, having another. Let's say now they're like it's after Christmas and they have some sort of established relationship. They're really moving fast here. I don't know. I like the Quidditch stuff. There's a good shot of the team in here, if I can find it. And they're getting one of their pep talks from Cedric. Well, here's both teams lining up. Here's Cedric and Wood shaking hands before the game. You can see the Hufflepuffs on one side and the Gryffindors there, and there's Madam Hooch in the middle. But also, here's just one of the team.
Hooch.
Oh, here's Sir Cadogan in his full armor. I'm pulling it wrong way. So you can't see his face. So that's kind of too bad. I assume he's not literally a handsome-looking guy. He's supposed to be a real klutz. Oh, it's a previous chapter, actually, that has the... It's no big deal anyway. Oh, yeah, so here's Wood giving a pep talk to the team. You can see Harry, Wood, the Weasleys, and then the 3 female chasers, Alicia, Katie, and Angelina. Katie has the dark brown hair. The lighter brunette is Alicia, and Angelina is black. Right. So this is interesting too, because again, they're combining things here. Harry never thinks about trying to use the invisibility cloak because he knows it doesn't work on Dementors. So for this trip, he does not have the invisibility cloak. Because here's the trip, the fateful trip, and this is where I became a big Harry Potter fan, is this chapter, the Marauders map, where these two, I can't believe they give him the map. Can you imagine giving away something so awesome? But anyway, they're going to give him the map. So Harry doesn't actually have the invisibility cloak in the book. He doesn't have any plans to go to Hogsmeade. He's just resigned that he can't go. But they give him the map, and he takes the secret tunnel, and he goes. But they're going to combine this with another time where he has the invisibility cloak with him. But he doesn't have it the first time. The first time he just goes, and he blends into crowds. And we're going to get there in a minute. But, there's the whole thing in the 3 broomsticks. And we'll get there when we get there. But, yeah. But there, again, the reason he has the invisibility cloak now is they are combining. Because Harry goes more than once into Hogsmeade using the map. Here is Harry's fall off his broom with Dementors all around. I mean, I would be a chaser because they're the most active. So if I played, I'd be a chaser. I want to throw the ball around and get involved. I mean, seekers get a lot of the glory, and I don't think I'm burly enough for a beater. And I don't know. When I first started to play soccer when I was a little kid, I was goalie, but I stopped that after like my first year because I like to run. And that's one of the main reasons why I was the position I was in as I played soccer growing up, is that I was either, you could say, a midfielder or a halfback. They're in between the forwards and the defense. And I like that because they run the most. They cover the most ground. They're always in motion. So it'd be kind of the same thing there. I'd rather be a chaser because the chasers are always moving. Here's a very small section, just a small section of the Marauders map. Obviously, it's bigger and more complicated than they can possibly show in here. But it's trying to show positions of Mrs. Norris and Dumbledore and I think Peeves. So pretty cool. I already ruined one of the tissue papers, so I have to be more careful with the ones I have. I don't know if you really need them, but I try to keep them. Kind of been neglecting this book. Right, so they're combining 2 things here. This whole incident with, again, one of Crabbe or Goyle is missing and is just replaced by some skinny guy with a scarf. I don't know who that's supposed to be. But this doesn't take place at Christmas. This happens later. And I do like that it works well with snowballs because it's later, it's after Christmas, there's no snow, so Harry actually throws mud at them. But they're mixing up the order of events here. This happens well after Christmas and well after the scene that we're about to see where Harry learns more of, not the whole truth, but more of the truth about Black. Yeah. So there's some guy. I wish I knew who was Crabbe and who was Goyle, but again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like, one of them always has to be there. It's no big deal. But here they are out in the snow. Children in the snow. Well, yeah, Jess, I was just saying, this whole scene here of an invisible cloaked Harry attacking them, this takes place after Christmas. This is a whole separate Hogsmeade visit. They've just moved it, I think, because they think it looks better in the snow, and because they don't want him to go to Hogsmeade anymore after finding out what he finds out. But he does, because they're having this take place before his scene in the Three Broomsticks, where he's about to find out a whole bunch of information about Black that the public doesn't know, where he finds out that allegedly Black betrayed his parents. So that's another thing that's different here too. Harry's kind of weird in this, in that he's going to purposely see Fudge and the others and decide all on his own for no reason to follow them. I guess because they start talking about Black outside, but it's completely different in the book. In the book, they just go to the Three Broomsticks because they can. They're having butterbeer, and then Fudge's party comes in. It's Fudge, McGonagall, Flitwick, who they've cut from the scene, as you can see here, and Hagrid. And then and since Harry's not supposed to be there, and because Harry does not have an invisibility cloak, they all hide behind like a Christmas tree, but they listen into the conversation, and that's where they find out. In this, Harry just goes in by himself, invisibly. It's not like a bad change, I don't understand why they did it. Like, why did Harry feel the need to follow them? Doesn't it make more sense that they're already there when they come in? Like, have Harry just they say no underage wizards allowed, but it's not that kind of bar. You can be underage and in the bar in there, but so that's just one of those changes where I don't necessarily have a problem with it. But usually when they change things, I understand if they're simplifying something or it has some sort of narrative purpose. This I just don't get. For some reason, they're like, well, we've already made Harry have the invisibility cloak on a trip that he actually didn't have it for, so let's have him use it. I guess they thought the scene might look better through him watching invisibly, because here they're off in a private room and everything. This all happens just out in the common room, but it's not a big deal. But he's still going to get most of the same information. Black was the secret keeper, and he betrayed them, and he killed the Muggles, and he killed Pettigrew, and so Harry's still going to get the same information out of it, except that in the other, he wasn't behind the invisibility cloak, and Ron and Hermione were already with him, so he doesn't have to fill them in. They were actually there with him and overheard it. So this change, I don't really get it. It doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to simplify anything or make anything smoother, but I think it's just because they'd already decided to move the scene where he's attacking them in the invisibility cloak. They're like, we might as well use the invisibility cloak for this scene. That's all I can think. Because actually, this is just Christmas. Harry comes into Hogsmeade again with the invisibility cloak well after Christmas, and that's where he has the scene where he throws stuff at Malfoy and the Slytherins. And the thing about that's not in this either is that, like, in the end of that attack, actually part of the cloak comes off and his head is visible for a second. So Malfoy runs back to the castle to tell on him and say, I saw his head. And, Snape grills him. He says, if he saw your head, that means the rest of you's there too. And you're breaking the rules, just so that Snape is kind of onto him. But that's all been messed up here. But I guess it was probably visually better to have him attack them with snowballs and throwing mud at them, I guess. Well, I don't know. No, I've always found the Quidditch stuff interesting. It has less to do with what the sport is. I just care about things like positions and rivalries. It's kind of weird. I think just because I like sports anyway, right? Like, I don't think necessarily it's the greatest sport or the most interesting sport. I'm just interested in the competitive side of it. Like, who plays what position, who goes up against who. Like, I did like that stuff. Like I said, I always thought it was interesting that Harry, Cho, and Cedric were all Seekers. Malfoy's one too. I always thought that was kind of interesting. It was something that linked them, because a Seeker is kind of a unique thing. I don't know. But it's not because I think the sport is so great. I don't even necessarily think the scenes are that thrilling, although they're fine. I just have like a sports mentality, I guess. It matters to me. Like, I care what numbers people wear. Like, you could be a professional. You could be playing in like the NBA, and a reporter be like, you wear number 18. Why is that? They're like, I don't fucking know. Who cares? It's a number. But I'm the opposite of that. Like, numbers have always meant something to me. I am 41 years old. I haven't played sports in an organized way since I was like 20. And I never played any meaningful level. I didn't play high level. I was never going to be a professional. But it still matters to me to this day for people to know that when I played hockey, I was number 14. And then when I played soccer, I was number 11. I know that means nothing to anyone, but it means something to me. So that's just different. Like I said, you could talk to like, a professional and they might not care at all. They're like, a number's a number, or I just changed this number. But numbers have meanings to me. So the numbers are one thing that's actually not mentioned in the books, but they do show the movie. And I'm pretty sure Harry wears 7, which I thought was kind of cool. Seems like a good number for Harry. His office is pretty cool. It's much different.
I'm very similar in my views of the numbers and the...
Okay, so that has significance for you too, because I realize you could actually talk to somebody that plays in the NBA or the NHL or MLB, and like they actually don't care. They're like, it's a number, or I thought it was kind of lucky. That's all it is to it. Like, since I'm hockey centric, to me, certain numbers fit certain players or certain positions. Like for instance, like even though like in the modern times there's all sorts of high numbers, in hockey it goes back to like low. Like if you go back to like old days and original 6, it was just the numbers were just built outward. The goalie was 1. Then the defensemen were like 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the higher numbers were the forwards, right? Eventually, as the league got bigger and people came, higher numbers were added. But still, there's no such thing as a defenseman or a forward that wears number 1. There's just no such thing. There's nothing stopping you, but nobody does that. So I have this idea of a goalie number, a defenseman number, a forward number. I even have ideas of like certain kinds of play. Like to me, 44 is like a power forward number. Like I wouldn't, if you were like 5'8", I'd be like, and you're like a winger, I'd be like, you wouldn't wear 44. That makes no sense. And they'd look at me like I'm insane because I have weird preconceived notions of what numbers mean. But I've always been like that. So, but that's what I mean about the Quidditch. I think that's so I take that weird fixation I have on things in sports and I apply it to the Quidditch. So this Quidditch itself, how the sport works, I'm indifferent to it. They throw balls around. Basically, as I said in previous movies, Seeker was just made up so Harry could be extra special, which I think is kind of lame. And what kind of sport has like one position? It's just like, oh, I found it. Game over. It's over. Everything you guys did was everything you guys were doing was irrelevant because I caught the snitch. So okay, finally we're into the Dementor lessons to learn about Expecto. This was another thing that helped me too. I think this is the first spell that I thought was pretty cool. Like the first 2 movies, there were various spells, but none of them, they were all kind of standard stock. This spell does this spell. Expecto Patronum, I thought was a unique, interesting idea of conjuring up like a magical guardian to fight for you against something that is weak to it. And again, the same sort of mentality. I like that everybody's is different. Harry's eventually takes the form of a stag, which makes sense because that's the animal that his father would transform into as an animagi, which is not revealed in this movie. Speaking of things that drive me nuts about this movie, as much as I like it, I know I said things that are left out. They don't mention it.
That's one of the big ones for me as a first-time watcher, not reading the books.
Yeah, so that's my big thing.
I feel like they were. I didn't understand the stag at the end, and
yeah. There's that and the whole thing about the map. I don't want to get there before we get there, but that's my big problem. Again, this is my favorite of the movies. I think this is the best movie. I really love the adaptation. I just feel like this movie could have been not even 10 minutes. It could have been 6, 7 minutes longer, maybe even less. Just add a few extra lines of exposition to explain some things, and we'd be golden. And for some reason, they don't do it, and it drives me insane. It was one thing, like, I couldn't even, like, I was so fixated on the first time I saw the movie in theaters, like, that's kind of all I could think about. And now, I have all these years of hindsight and comparing it to the other movies, multiple reads, multiple watches, I do think it stands out as the best movie. It's not my favorite book, but it is my favorite movie. I think it's really great. But that always bothers me. I'm like, what? Like, it gets incoherent towards the end. Like, if you read the books, you can fill the gaps in yourself, no problem. But if you hadn't, you're kind of left a little bit confused. So here is Crookshanks going after Scabbers. Nice shot of the squashed face, and I mean, good casting for Crookshanks. That's what he looks like. And this is where this starts to get to a boiling point because Crookshanks is really starting to go after Scabbers. So that's interesting too. There he is. Very nice cat. Is that like what an important role he plays because he's the only one that is on to Pettigrew. And I think there was probably a point in the book where I thought, okay, is Crookshanks an animagus? But no, Crookshanks is just a special kind of cat, I guess, that can tell the difference between a rat and a magical rat. Here's, I assume from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a werewolf entry. This is keeping very much with the movie look, where it's a very long,
I was going to say that's very
spindly looking. I assume that was on purpose to line up a bit with the movie. I don't think usually Jim Kay felt that sort of constraint. I think Jim Kay probably just drew things the way they were pictured in the book. But I think for that, maybe he felt some pressure or just thought it was a good look. I already showed a little fold out of the Marauders map, of course, a very simplified version. Here's a more like complicated one, although it's not a fold out, showing what the Marauders map would look like. But yeah, the whole thing about the four friends and the map is not well explained in the movie. And I'm just kind of baffled why they couldn't have added a little bit more dialogue to clear that up.
The Proudfoot.
Yeah, their nicknames. Padfoot, Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs.
Padfoot and Prongs,
yeah. Because the first, we've seen in this, right, Argus Filch. So good. See, this is what really made me love the books, was this intrigue, this idea of being up late at night and watching the people moving through the castle. And here's the big thing, right? He sees Peter Pettigrew on the map. It's like, that's impossible. And they do an even better version of it later in the fourth movie, which is, again, not really in, fourth book, which is not really in the movie, which drives me nuts. And this, again, is where I relate a lot to Harry. Because, if I lived in that world, I wouldn't have to be a special chosen one. I could just be a random, insignificant student, but I would always be breaking curfew to do shit like this. There's no way I wouldn't. I was just that kind of kid. I would want to be out wandering the castle after, lights out. That's just who I was.
Me too. Not necessarily causing any true chaos, but just
not to cause chaos, just normal curiosity. Like the whole point is I never want to get caught. Like Harry fucks up a lot because he gets caught a lot. So now we've reached the point where it's like my most recent reading, I only got about this far. So then I had to jump ahead to read some stuff. So there's some stuff I'm fuzzy on here and how this differs from the book, because it's been a while since I read those specific chapters. This does happen. Harry does go out on an excursion trying to figure out where the hell Pettigrew is. It seems like they walk right past each other, but, he doesn't see anything. He's like, what is going on with this map? And Snape's going to show up and Lupin's going to show up. That is all the same. And this is where Lupin discovers that he has the map. And they're going to have an interesting conversation about it. And it's true that the first time, obviously Lupin's not going to tell him everything. But Lupin does eventually tell him everything in the Shrieking Shack, but not in the movie. And that's what really drives me nuts. So, you just need a couple extra sentences. Right. So here's the other thing. There's a whole subplot about him getting the firebolt. They don't do that in this. In this, it just ends with him getting it as a present at the end. It's just like, at the very end, it's like, here's a firebolt. But we don't know who sent it, and has, the feather, meaning, obviously it's from Sirius. But actually, Sirius sends him the firebolt now, during the school year. And the whole thing is they take it away from him because they think maybe Sirius Black sent it to him and jinxed it. So here's McGonagall taking away the firebolt, saying, Potter, this could be jinxed or dangerous with traps, so we have to take it away from you. So that's the whole thing. I don't mind that. I don't mind that they remove that. It's not a big deal. And they do try to make up for it in the end by having him just wind up with a firebolt at the end. So there's the whole thing about him reading the map and the map insulting him. That's on brand. That's how it works. Yeah, Quidditch is like flying soccer. I mean, it's like flying soccer again, but you have to invent a special position for the chosen one. Yeah, I always think Seeker is kind of pretty stupid. But as I said, I get bogged down with details in sports, like positions, style of play, numbers. I get bogged down with that kind of stuff. So that's why I get drawn to the Quidditch stuff. It's only barely touched on even in the books, but I fixate on it. I'm like, because I get the feeling that Rowling, who I've tried not to mention, but I mean, obviously is the writer, didn't know much about sports. You could sort of tell by the way she writes Quidditch that she was not really into sports. Like, she might be British, but I don't think she was any sort of football fan or anything like that. I almost feel like maybe she talked to people who were to maybe get a sense of it. I don't know. It's not a big deal. So now Harry's managed to not get in too much trouble. Lupin's covered up for him, and now Lupin's going to it's the same thing. It's going to berate him about how dangerous it is for him to be out and how dangerous it is for him to have this map because if Black gets it. Because again, at this point, we don't know, but like he does not know the truth about Black either. Because we're going to get there when we get there, but there's going to be this whole thing where like Harry and Hermione are going to accuse Lupin, especially Hermione, because she's the only one that figured out the werewolf thing. She's like, "You've been helping him," but he hasn't. At this point, he knows the same stuff Harry knows mostly. I mean, except for the stuff back at school. But I mean, he does believe the story. He thinks that like one of his best friends, who he trusted and grew up with, out of nowhere betrayed his best friends and murdered a bunch of people, and is now trying to murder their son. Like Lupin does believe that. Like he doesn't want to because James are serious with his friend, but he does think that. So Lupin is not helping him. The one who's helping him is Crookshanks, which is pretty funny in hindsight. The person on the inside helping Sirius is Crookshanks. But there, he does mention Peter Pettigrew, and this is where the whole plot turns, that he mentions he saw Pettigrew on the map. Because now that's very interesting information for Lupin. Because one, he knows the map does not lie. If it shows Pettigrew, that means he's there. And two, now while he still believes that story, something obviously is going on if Pettigrew is alive and around. So this is where the whole thing really turns for Lupin. So we've missed a few. They skipped over some of these classes, which is no big deal because they're not important. So it does feel kind of abrupt when Hermione just leaves in a huff. But the point is, like, we're well into the school year. She's been going to this class for months. This makes it seem like Hermione was like there a couple times. It was like, fuck this. But, I mean, I get we know the timeline. We know we're past Christmas. We know we're into like third term, whatever. But still, because they've had to cut some of these scenes, it seems a little abrupt just by watching. It just seems like, this is weird. Hermione just wants to leave. And we didn't even actually have her, I don't think, contradicting her early on, did we? Because there's a part where like she's like, I guess she did. She contradicts her about some of the stuff about the Grimm, which is pretty significant, right? Because like, no, that seems so against character for Hermione. Like Hermione's arguing with a teacher. What the fuck is going on? Anyway, she leaves. Doesn't really matter. She's taking 1,000 courses. She doesn't need divination. But they see that proves that they are not in the trapdoor part. The way she walks out, but not a big deal. But I do miss that detail. Right, so this is where we see why she actually got hired, because she can be a true seer at certain times, but she's not aware of it. She's gonna babble out part of the prophecy in front of Harry. I like to say, Ron's just like, I'm not going back there. Screw that. Good friend, Ron. And I'm back to Quidditch. Like I said, I'd like to be. If I played, I'd probably be a chaser. I have no idea how good I'd be. I'm not a great thrower. I'd have to get better at throwing. I didn't play throwing stuff much. I don't have a developed arm, so I would have to work on that, I guess. I'm pretty good at catching. I could catch a good pass, and it's pretty academic to say whether or not you'd be good at flying a broom, because that's not something that's real. I'd like to think I would be good at a broom. Because like, I don't know. It's not in any way transferable, but I mean, I was a pretty mediocre hockey player. But if I had one skill that was better than a lot of people, and my best skill was skating. Yeah, I was very mobile. Maybe I wasn't the most powerful skater or the fastest, but I was very agile. I could change direction quickly, stop, start. I was pretty good at slipping checks and things like that. And that's one of the reasons why when I was like my first year at university, I was able to play in that intramurals league where like everybody was bigger than me and better than me, definitely. But I was a good enough skater that, I kept up with the flow of play. And even though I got hit a lot, I still managed to keep from getting my head taken off, But that's not transferable to Quidditch. But I'd like to think if I was Quidditch, I'd be kind of Harry-like in that I'd be a very good flyer. But I mean, that's kind of the basics for Quidditch. But yeah, I don't think I'd be good at swinging a bat as a bludger. And I don't think I'd really be great throwing as a chaser. So maybe I should have been a seeker, because seekers don't have to throw or catch, or they just have to zoom around. So as much as I'm critical of seekers, because I do think it's like a lame, made-up position just to make Harry special, maybe that's what I'd wind up being. Because if I was going to be a chaser, I'd really have to work on throwing. There's a lot of girl chasers, though. So I figure I can throw as well as most girls. So here comes, I think, Hermione's best moment in the entire series. It's nothing smart she does. It's nothing magical she does. It's just being badass. Right. So we haven't talked about it, but the whole subplot, which is a big deal, is Buckbeak is going to be executed for his crime of hitting Malfoy, which is not a subplot, really. It's actually extremely important to the main plot. So once again, yeah, one of Crabbe or Goyle's missing, and that extra guy's here again. So yeah, he was there at the beginning of the movie. So it's like maybe during shooting he got sick or something, because yeah, there's that skinny guy instead. But yeah, this punch is the best thing. I think this is her best moment in the entire series. It's just, and this is actually better than in the book, because in the book she just slaps him. I think a punch is so much better. So that I think that's a big improvement on the book. You know, just wham there. Oh, I love it. I also love their reaction too. Like, I think it's because maybe wizards aren't physical people. They're like, she's using her hands. She's throwing hands. We don't know how to deal with that. That they just all take off, which is funny because the whole point of like Crabbe and Goyle is supposed to be like they're physically intimidating. But this makes it seem like they're a bunch of pansies because we use wands. We don't know how to do fisticuffs. That girl isn't playing fair. It's pretty funny. I do like the geography better. It does make, I do like that it's down a hill. It's not a big deal, right? Like in the first two movies, he's clearly like on a level. It's like flat. Here it's down a hill towards the edge. It works a little bit better. They've greatly expanded the size of his hut or cabin or whatever. You wouldn't really notice it unless you like watch this like back to back after the first two. They just added like a larger area and stuff. What's that guy's name's like Coltrane?
Yeah, Robbie Coltrane, I think.
He's dead too now, isn't he?
He did pass.
Well, that's just like a badass name, Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah. Well, he goes back. He has a small part in National Lampoon's European Vacation. Yeah, but he pops up.
That's my least favorite National Lampoon. Release
even over Vegas or the new one.
I not more. Yeah, it's better than the new one. But yeah, I'm a person that actually takes Vegas over Europe, and I know that's like crazy to a lot of people, but I don't know. I don't know. I feel like Europe was such a big miss, and Europe's actually back in the '80s when that stuff was awesome. I don't know. Europe never worked for me. It's not like it's bad. It's not like it's a bad movie. I'm a fan of that series. I like it, but I actually like Vegas. Vegas is a pretty mediocre movie. I just think Vegas is a little bit better than Europe. I don't know why. I think like it just has little things in it, like Wallace Shawn, stuff like that.
I like Vegas more than a lot of people as well, but I do like European.
Yeah, most people, think Europe is really good. I'm fine with it, but yeah, so I'd have to watch it again to even recognize him. But that's an awesome name, Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah.
So another thing they're going to do here, they play up the time loop stuff a bit more. In the book, they aren't distracted out of there by, their future selves throwing stuff at them. So they add a few of those touches, which I don't mind because it makes sense because we're using a time loop thing here. Because the whole idea is, Harry is rescued by himself, meaning he's in a loop where it always happened. The future Harry always saved the past Harry by conjuring the Patronus. I mean, if we've ever buried the lead on this, it's like time travel, right? Like time travel is not real, and there's different ways in fiction to approach it, and none work very well because they're also like, I remember thinking like I watched Time Cop recently. Oh my god! If you actually think about how time travel works in Time Cop, your head will explode. And that's just fucking Time Cop, So, like, it's the same deal in this. Like, think about it. She has a time turner, so she can go back in time and go to classes. It's mentioned early on. There are times when she's in 3 classes at the same time. So imagine from her point of view, she goes to a class, and the other 2 classes know she's absent, but the teacher knows that not to mark her absent because they know their timeline will soon be erased. She goes back in time again, and while her past self is attending 1 class, she attends the 2nd class. She's still absent for the 3rd class, and then she does it again. So every time she's absent, she erases that, I guess. So anything that happened when she wasn't there is erased from the timeline. So it's pretty bananas to think of. And it's the same thing here. It's like, oh, we've got a thing where, you know, we get overcome by Dementors. But no, you don't. You never do. It's like, we passed out. I don't understand. How did it happen? It's like something saved us. It's like, you saved yourself. It's a loop, you know. Loop stuff is nuts. But they added, so that's always been a loop. So I don't mind that they add that. They add the whole thing where they throw stuff to get themselves out of the thing. And the whole thing here where the werewolf is about to get them and then it hears like a howling down in the woods. Turns out, you know, that was Hermione. She did it herself. She went, ooh, that's also not in the book. But I don't mind those things because they line up with what's happening. So this takes Crookshanks out of it, and that bothers me. Crookshanks is the one that goes up and presses it out on the tree and shuts the whole thing down. So they don't use Crookshanks as well as they should have in this, because that's also one of the things that fascinated me in reading the book. Harry, at one point in the middle of the night, Harry looks out the window. He sees the black dog that's been stalking him and Crookshanks walking along together across the grounds. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I love it. It's not in the movie. So here's another extended action scene. This does not really happen, but they're doing it. I don't mind, except for there's going to be some cartoon physics in a second. Like, she's going to grab onto it. I mean, that's going to knock the wind out of you. But as she's getting pulled, I love that it's just allowed on the grounds. It's just bludgeon every student that comes near it to death. This. She's going to come around. Oh, no, it's the second time. Well, look how high she is. And Harry's glasses are off, so it's a blur fest for him. But yeah, here's some cartoon physics. That wouldn't happen like that. She doesn't suddenly have the strength to do that. Anyway. A lot of tunnels in this one. The tunnels into Hogsmeade. Well, this is technically a tunnel into Hogsmeade, too. It's a tunnel to the Shrieking Shack, which is in the edge of Hogsmeade. So I feel like we missed some of the training stuff where he's trying to do the Patronus, but whatever. It's hard to fit everything in. Don't have time to look at that. But here's a view of the Shrieking Shack from the outside. There's Ron and Hermione observing it on the much later day, not Christmas, when Harry shows up invisibly and throws mud at Malfoy. Right here. Right. So the Quidditch final doesn't happen, I guess. They just skip past the Quidditch final. This is the year they finally win, and they skip past it.
Yeah.
Because they have a very violent final against Slytherin, and they win, and they finally win. And it's, you know, it's sort of a nice arc ending thing for Wood, because Wood, his entire 7 years, his first 6 years, you know, they hadn't won. And then finally in his last year, they get it. And he felt like, you know, we're going to win the first or second year. So here's another thing. I don't have the passage, but I brought this up before. And I was talking about stuff that obviously Rowling or whoever hadn't planned yet is this. It's mentioned here, too, about Harry wanting to kill Black and about Harry having him and not being able to do it or go through with it. But we know now, what would Harry have done? He doesn't know any spell that can kill anybody. The movie makes it seem, and the book too, the book is just as guilty, like Harry had the ability to magically kill him. But he doesn't. He doesn't even know of Avada Kedavra. Like, it makes sense when the adults are pointing wands at each other. They all know their business. But they make it seem like, even in the book, like Harry has pointing his wand, it's like, oh, but he couldn't do it. Like, he couldn't do it because he physically, literally couldn't do it. He does not have the magic or the know-how or the ability to do it. But here's another thing stolen from Ron. This whole thing where she says, we might already be past it. I guess we're past it because Lupin's already here. But she says, you know, if you're going to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too. Ron says that. And it's even more badass because Ron has a broken leg. He like half stands up and he's flailing and he says it. So once again, Hermione steals glory from Ron for the sake of that scriptwriter guy. But yeah, here things go way too fast. They're just too fast. This needs to be longer. This needs to be explained better. Wait one more minute. Harry has the right to know why. Okay. This time I'm going to really pay attention to the dialogue on screen. You betrayed my parents. You're the reason they're dead. Harry, it wasn't him. Somebody did betray your parents, but it was somebody who until quite recently I believe to be dead. Because that's the other thing that we're finding out. Is like, no, he didn't know either. This is new information for him as well. Come on out, Peter. Come on out. And now Snape shows up to wreck everything. Snape is here way too soon. Also, I have to say, I know you've defended Snape a lot. This is the point in the books where you realize Snape was never a good guy. Never. He fought on the right side eventually, and he did do heroic things. But besides all the stuff he does that would get any teacher fired, he's super unprofessional, is this. He hates Sirius so much that he literally does not care that he's innocent and literally wants him dead. He won't listen to anybody. He'll blast anybody that argues with him. All he wants is for the guy that picked on him in school to die. And he almost ruins everything. And in a way, he does. Like, Pettigrew might not have gotten away if not for Snape fucking everything up. So I love it when people try to, like, defend Snape. Like, he is evil. He is on the side of evil. He's saying, like, you're not going back to Azkaban, buddy. They're going to suck your soul out. And I'm going to watch it. And I'm going to love it. Like, Snape's a bad, bad guy. He's just in a compromised position by Dumbledore that he has to protect Harry. That's it. He's not brave, he's not heroic, and he's not moral. He's bloodthirsty, he's petty, he's just awful. So, I mean, and this is the thing that just proves it. He so wants Sirius dead. He doesn't care about the truth. It doesn't matter to him that Sirius never killed anybody or hurt anybody. All that matters is you picked on me in school, so I hope you get your soul sucked out by demons. And I'm going to make sure it happens. Yeah. So again, they're moving things around here about the rat. Like, they talked about all this before. Yeah. This is just a mess. I love the movie. They botched this completely. The order they give information out in, the order things happen is all jumbled, and it doesn't explain enough. They're not talking about the map. They don't mention they wrote the map. They don't mention that they used to turn themselves into animagi to help their friend, their werewolf, hang out. They don't say that's why this place exists. They don't say any of it. It's just a convoluted nightmare that I just don't know how anybody could have navigated. And I don't know, because I'd read the book several times. The book came out in '99. I must have read the book about 2 or 3 times before this movie ever happened. So this whole part, everything in the Shrieking Shack is a nightmare. It's still my favorite movie. But this is incredibly botched, and I can only put it on the screenwriter himself or whoever had final say of, like, the dialogue, because it's a mess. It doesn't explain things properly. Like, all you really get is, okay, they were friends at school, and they also don't explain that animagi have to be registered. Like, the whole point is they were illegal, unregistered animagi. There's even explanation, like, even stuff like you might think, okay, so he didn't know Sirius wasn't bad or ever like that. So if he thought Sirius was a bad guy, I'm talking about Lupin, why wouldn't he have told Dumbledore and the people, hey, I know for a fact he's an animagi, and that's why one of the reasons why, like, the Ministry can't find him. They don't know they should be looking for this black dog. There's even a reason for that. He explains it was part of our group lie, and I felt guilty because we were betraying Dumbledore's trust. The whole thing was I was a werewolf. People weren't going to let me in the school. But Dumbledore was so kind and understanding. He bent the rules and changed and made things so that I could come to the school. And we betrayed his trust by fucking around, by turning into unregistered, to zoom around with a werewolf. And he said, I realize now as an adult, we were putting people in danger because obviously the werewolf might have gotten away and bitten somebody. But we didn't think of that because we were kids and we were goofing around and we thought we were so clever. Again, not in the movie whatsoever. So, like, I just don't know what you could extrapolate from the scene if you don't have that information going in from the book. Like, you get that they were friends in school. You get that both those two are animagi. One's a rat and one's a dog. You don't know why. You don't know if animagi are rare or not, or if they have to register with the Ministry or not. You don't know any of that. And they don't mention that they are the ones that wrote the map. So, of course, he understands the map. Like, in the book, he says, I know because I wrote it. I'm Moony. He explains all that. Everything. I just feel like even if you're worried about the runtime, it's essential information that they just drop the ball on. It's just a convoluted mess that I just don't know what you could take out of it. So I know I'm being super harsh because it is my favorite movie, but that's my blemish. I still think it's the best movie, but they just completely fuck up the whole Shrieking Shack thing. It's just a confusing mishmash of events that, I mean, they're not completely incoherent. You can follow it, you know what's going on, but you're just not filled in enough. You don't really understand the context for a lot of the stuff that happens. And like, yeah, if you watch it, it's just like, okay, I have some sense that that Lupin knows what the map is because he says mischief managed at the end, but that's it. He doesn't say I'm Looney. And what's funny is later in the series, they make in the movies, they make reference to stuff as if they had referenced it in the movies. They don't, because that's the whole thing in the fifth one, right? When Harry so desperately has been tricked and thinks he has to go save Sirius, he thinks, because Voldemort fucked with his mind, he thinks, Voldemort has Sirius at the Ministry and he's going to kill him. And he gets caught by Umbridge. But Snape is there too, and he knows Snape understands what he says. So he says he's got Padfoot. He's got Padfoot in the place where it's hidden, which is funny because Padfoot is not mentioned whatsoever in this movie. Never comes up except for they do mention they're the people who wrote the map, but they never connect it to James. And as you said, when we're going to see the big moment here with the with Harry's Patronus, like we don't know why it's a stag. We just think it's random. Okay, that's a pretty cool animal. We have no idea it has like an emotional connection to his father. So I know I'm bitching a lot about my favorite of the movies. But now that I'm on top of it, it just upsets me. I'm just like, I think what bothers me is I think it's a really easy fix. I get sometimes, you look at really complicated things or really multifaceted things, and you're like, yeah, that's a challenge to like fit that into a movie and get it. Like, I feel like all this took was some lines of dialogue, literally. It didn't take extra effects. It didn't take an action scene. It didn't take a bunch of characters. It took some extra lines of dialogue by characters who are already delivering exposition. So that really bothers me. They were just like, they'll get the gist of it. Because, I mean, yeah, a lot of the people watching the movie were like me. They could fill in the blanks because they've read the books, but it must have left other people at sea. This is not part of the plot at all, but this is a really good page of the greenhouse, one of the greenhouses. Jim Kay just does such great work.
Yeah.
And this is a criticism of both the book and the movie, and it's like it just does seem kind of like lazy writing. That one, Lupin just leaves the map open on his desk for Snape to find, because that's how Snape finds them. And two, Lupin also just forgets to take his potion, even though that's like the one thing he has to remember to do. So those both seem like weird brain cramps by Lupin that even in the book is not, well done. It's just like, I don't know, a lot of stuff was going on. So I just left the map and forgot my potion, and now it's, led to this fuck up. Yeah, people point to this like Snape's the hero, but he's not.
I usually do. I mean, even if you're saying he has to save Harry, he technically doesn't have to curl around the other two.
Well, they're there. And besides,
coward.
he's not saving them. They would have just all died. Like, he's trying, but it wouldn't have worked. They just all would have been torn apart. Sirius saves them. And I get
he knows that. I mean, the point
is, yeah, I know.
The point is, he's putting himself in front of the children.
But again, there's nothing else he can really do. I mean, he can't run away.
I mean, he wouldn't be all bad. I think at this point, as a viewer, though, that I was like, I knew he wasn't, but this really proved that. For me, this proves how petty and awful. He's not the main bad guy. He's not a bad guy.
This proved to me, like, this movie proved to me that, like, I get, like, he's not going to ever betray them because early on they established this whole thing about how Dumbledore trusts him. And I knew, they can play with your expectations in a lot of ways. Like, as I said, like, I was, like, I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to say I'm so smart because I don't think I am. Like, how many people really thought that, like, he just murdered Dumbledore? Like, did anybody, like, I think there were people that thought that. They were like, he murders Dumbledore. I was like, can't you tell by the framing? Like, literally, Dumbledore goes, Severus, please. It's like, oh, he's asking him to do it. Even if you don't know the reasons yet, like, oh, okay, he needs him to kill him for some reason. Because I was just like, yeah, they're allowed to show Dumbledore as fallible. They show that he makes mistakes. But it would have ruined the series if it was like, Dumbledore is usually very wise, but he makes mistakes. And his biggest mistake was trusting Severus Snape, who murdered him and almost caused Voldemort to return to power. Like, no, you knew that wasn't going to happen. But anyway, this is the book and movie. Who wants to say book because it started that proved to me that whatever Sirius did for the rest, or not Sirius, Severus Snape did for the rest of the series. Like, he is a bad guy. Like, he hates Sirius that much. I like Gary Oldman, but yeah, they should have cast younger. But what's done is done. I mean, they already had cast Snape from the very beginning, so, and they're supposed to be like the same age. As I said, good acting, I guess, overcomes it. But like, yeah, technically, like Sirius and Snape should be like in their late 30s at this point. It is a good point to understand that Ron's parents would be older. Like, Ron's parents, I don't even think would have been in school at the same time. Or they might have been like in their last year when Harry's parents were in their first year. Because, you know, they were older. And they had children who were older. He's trying, but it's not enough. Let's get this face yanked off. Did I mention being a teacher? I don't think I did. I'm not exactly. I'm like a sort of teacher. I'm an English tutor. I'm not a professional teacher. There goes the soul. Goes out the mouth. Which I can't make an argument about. I mean, if a soul was a real thing, sure, it has to come out somewhere. Why not the mouth? Yeah, and there's the glowing stag. There is prongs, which again has significance that they do not properly point out in the movie. Like, your Patronus is your dad, but we don't know that. I mean, they try to make it say, like, he, in his memory, like, when he talks about it later, he's like, it was my dad who made the Patronus. It's like, your dad is the Patronus, you know, sort of. Hey, Art, you're late. We're getting into the time loop stuff, Orc. Well, yeah, I mean, Hogwarts is the only school for like all of the United Kingdom. I've talked about this before. Again, it's just punching holes and being a nitpicker. But I mean, it doesn't add up numbers wise, right? Like, if the entire United Kingdom only had one school, there'd be a lot more students at Hogwarts. Like, and even like, you get the sense that Hogwarts has somewhere between 750 to 1,000 students at the most. You know, maybe 200, 250 students per house. And even if that were the case, like, they don't have enough teachers. Like, apparently, if you teach a subject, you teach every single year for that subject. I don't know if logistically that works, but again, you could say, oh, well, if you didn't see the other stuff, you'd be like, well, okay, you know, obviously there aren't as many witches and wizards as there are muggles there. But then in later movies and stuff, you see scenes at like, you know, like the Ministry for Magic, and there's literally hundreds of people. So it's like, if all these people, all their children funnel into Hogwarts, wouldn't there be like way more? But, you know, it's no big deal. I get it. The numbers just don't work out there. And then they say, you know, there's Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Those are other European schools, but still, that's only 3 schools for all of Europe. And they mention an American school in the Fantastic Beasts series, but it's like, America's a massive country. Like, it only has one school. Like, again, I don't know. It's not a huge deal. Right. So Dumbledore believes them right off because he's awesome, I guess, is the best answer. Like, they tell him all this impossible stuff. He's like, yep, I believe you. And I mean, good on him. He's right. He's like, don't worry. I know that you guys can manipulate time, so you got this. I do like that he has like a hyper awareness. That is something cool about Dumbledore. Like, in the second one, when they're all under the invisibility cloak in the thing, when Fudge comes in to like arrest Hagrid or whatever, you know, Dumbledore obviously can see them, knows they're there. And the same sort of hyper awareness is going to show here, because as you see, when they loop back in time, every time they think maybe they're going to get seen down by Hagrid's hut, like, Dumbledore keeps managing to distract the attention. It's like he already knew this was coming. Like, it's really cool. Like, today, like, that isn't bad writing. That's like something cool about Dumbledore. He's so tuned in. Like, is funny because you've heard me rant and rave like an idiot about like a lack of explanation for things, but you don't need it all the time. And sometimes I like it when you have characters that are savvy enough to grasp things instantly. Speaking again of like a time loop thing, like if you watch Avengers Endgame, right, and they do their time heist and they go back to the times, there's a part where Thor and I think the Rocket Raccoon, they go back in time to during the events of the second Thor movie, so they can get one of the stones that's in Asgard, right? And so he runs into his mother, who in the real, in the present is dead. So he runs into his mother, and like she instantly realizes that he is Thor from the future. And he's like, well, how? She's like, I'm a witch. Like, I like that. Like, she doesn't need to like be filled in or explained. Like, she grasps it very quickly. And I like that Dumbledore is the same sort of character. He has like this weird hyper awareness about things. So
yes,
I don't think that's like bad or lazy writing. Because I was saying like,
very
we're
much
gonna
so.
get into it. There's these parts where it seems like, oh, we're about to get seen by Fudge or somebody, and then Dumbledore manages to distract their attention at just the right moment. Like, I like that. He's got like this hyper awareness going on. Like, he already knows what's going to happen, or has a sense of what needs to happen. It's really cool. Here's your greatest moment. Let's see it from another angle. I could watch that all day.
Hi, Orc.
I'm not even one of those people that even hates Malfoy that much. They make Malfoy very pathetic, so it's hard to hate Malfoy because they really make him lame. Like, I don't know. I get that all bullies are lame, but at least some bullies like have some dignity. Like, Malfoy has no dignity, and he has even less in the movies. Like, they humiliate him at every turn. Like, when he gets cut, he literally does get cut, but, I mean, he could have shown some backbone. And he goes, oh, it's killed me. And then when she punches him, he runs away like a sniffling coward. Yeah. Like, I get it. Like, it's good to make fun of bullies and show them for the cowards they are. Oh, I can do a good Malfoy, yeah. Actually, it's funny. He has a line we talked over because he can't catch everything. That's not in the book. I do like it. He delivers because after Hagrid's carrying him away, and he's like, "You'll pay for this." He's like, "You'll pay for this. You and your bloody chicken," which I think is funny.
Yes,
it's like good punch. But yeah. Oh, Back to the Future 2 vibes coming in. That was really the first movie to do this, right? It wasn't the first movie to do time travel. It was the first movie to jump back and revisit it. I mean, this is within the same movie. Back to the Future 2 is literally them going back to scenes from Back to the Future 1, which is even kind of crazier. But yeah. Back to the Future, of course, it's time travel. Doesn't make sense either. But literally, like, you can't name a time travel movie where you're like, oh, that time travel checks out, because there's really no such thing as time travel. The thing is, time travel movies all try to set up their own rules for how it works. But even then, it's very hard to make them make sense or make them follow it. But just to see Buckbeak before we steal him, otherwise he'll think Hagrid set him free. It's pretty funny, too. It is kind of a weird plan, in a way. Because all Hagrid really had to do, it turns out, was chain up Buckbeak in such a way that, like, he couldn't get out like right away, but if he worked on it over time, he'd get away. If he did that, nobody'd have to do anything. Because then Fudge and the guy would show up and be like, oh, yeah, it's chained up. They wouldn't look closely to see that it was, like, really loose, right? And then, like, over time, Buckbeak, being a smart creature, would, like, tap it enough or whatever to release himself. It's like, we don't need to do any of this because they're so laissez-faire at the end. They're like, I guess he got away. Well, that's all we can do. Nope, we don't blame you, Hagrid. We saw he was tied up. I like the laissez-faire attitude. McNair here is actually revealed to be a Death Eater later on, too, which is pretty funny. I get it. If your main job is, like, executing animals, then maybe being a Death Eater is not a big stretch. Yeah. So this isn't in the book. I don't mind though, because it plays into the time loop thing. It's like, because they only had the one thing, the end thing with the spell. In this, they're just adding a few more things. It's like, okay, I'll get us to move. I'll throw some stuff at us, and then the other thing is, oh, we're gonna get torn apart by Lupin. No, I'll call him down with my little wolf call. I don't mind those. Because they fit. They're not like out of sync with what's happening. So I don't have any issue with that. And what's funny, too, is I've complained a lot about how the movies fuck Ron up and make Hermione look better. It makes it sound like I resent Hermione. I don't at all. In fact, one of the things I enjoy about this is I kind of like seeing some Harry and Hermione time, just the two of them. That's actually something I enjoy about this section. Because it makes up for the second movie, where it's the reverse, right? Like, Hermione got petrified. So the end stuff is just Harry and Ron, and Harry and Ron had the adventure with the spider, and then they do the final dungeon stuff too with the Chamber of Secrets. I liked it here. It's a little payback. Now Ron's the one in the hospital wing because his leg's broken. So now it's just some Harry and Hermione action. So I know earlier on I made it sound like I was like anti-Hermione or something. I'm not at all. And one of the things I like about this movie and this book is I like that you get to Harry and Hermione without Ron. Just, something different, mixing things up a bit. But yeah, I will never get over them making Ron like completely flip in that scene where she's being bullied by Snape, where he goes from courageously standing up to the teacher and saying she gave you an answer and getting himself like detention to him just like side remarking to Harry, who's got a point, our friend is a big know-it-all. Like, man, that's like the sandbags Ron makes him look like an asshole. No reason to do that. It's one thing to take Ron's like good lines, like if you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us, and stealing and giving him Hermione, that's bad enough. But to just have him like reverse his position on something so he's on Snape's side, that's just unforgivable, man. Buckbeak is resigned. Buckbeak's like, if my death is coming, then let it come.
Well, do you ever go back even more with the time travel stuff and think, well, if there's time travel possible in this world, why aren't they using it to change some of the bigger shit that goes down wrong?
Right. And like in like
you use the excuse, meddling with time travel is dangerous. Well, then if you used it for this minuscule shit.
Yeah. Well, what's funny because this is like, shouldn't you just like, because what happens here is like, okay, we did a lot of things right, but Pettigrew still got away. Let's do another do-over. Because, why can't they just do another do-over until they get Pettigrew? Because it's like, okay, we know how to save Buckbeak. We know how to keep ourselves from getting torn apart from Lupin. We know how to get rid of the Dementors. All we have to figure out is a way to do it so that we also make sure Pettigrew doesn't get away. Like, you have as many chances as you want, don't you? But anyway, they do make a mention in, like, maybe even the last book about, like, somebody breaking into the Ministry and destroying all the Time Turners or something. Some bullshit. But yeah, actually, this is funny. This is one thing I'll give credit to Time Cop, right? Bringing up Time Cop again. What's funny about the world of Time Cop is forget how time travel works or any of the rules or any things they break or any of the cheesy stuff they do. They do get one thing kind of depressingly, well, I say right, but it's only, it's what I think is likely because time travel is not real, right? Because in the world of Time Cop, the way time travel works is this. Time travel is so destructive and so, it's so destructive and does not really provide any sort of benefits that the only thing they do is try to find a way to police it. That's the only point of time travel. It's like we accidentally discovered time travel. We realize the only thing that can happen from it is bad stuff. So we've created like a whole division of law enforcement to stop it. That's the premise of Time Cop. And in a way, it's depressingly right. It's just like, you're right. There's no good can come from this, but now all we can do is like try to police it. But yeah, it's pretty weird though when you think of the implications of some of these people who they're capturing. It's like, how did they get access to these time machines in the first place? It's like, I don't know. We don't have time for a Time Cop thing. But I actually watched it again somewhat recently. It's pretty funny. Also, they just have one of those rules because sometimes in time travel movies they'll just hand wave something away because they don't want to deal with it. And one of the things they hand wave in Time Cop is traveling to the future. They just say it's impossible. They say the only way you can time travel is to the past, and the only future time traveling you can do it is from the past to return to where you started from. They say it's impossible in the future. Future hasn't happened. You can't go there. And you can't say, well, I mean, you can't argue with it because, again, you don't know, right? It's just a fictional thing. So it's just like, okay. But, I mean, one of the things that really bothered me about a movie a lot of people like was, what was that movie called? It had Bruce Willis in it and not 12 Monkeys. I know, because it's like Bruce Willis is in more than one time travel movie. No, it's a more recent movie. Oh, it had, shit. It was directed by one of the Star Wars directors, Ryan something. It had, I think it's Ryan Johnson. It's directed by Ryan Johnson. It had that guy, like, he has like 3 names, which doesn't help because there's so many actors with 3 names. He was on Third Rock from the Sun. And he was in, Batman.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a movie a few years ago that had Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and he was like the past version He was the past version of Bruce Willis. It's called Looper. Looper, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a part like where he's asking him some like legitimate questions about like, you know, issues of time travel. And like his future self, as played by Bruce Willis, is like, don't think about it. It doesn't matter. Like he's just handling just because that's how it's written. And then there's like weird stuff like, you know, a guy will get cut and his future self will get a scar, you know, stuff like that. But it's just like, there's still no world where Joseph Gordon-Levitt can like turn into Bruce Willis. Like their ears have completely different, you know, structures and stuff. They cannot age into each other. But like that movie is just one of those movies again that just tries to hand wave away stuff. It's like, don't think about this or that. It doesn't matter. It's all bullshit, you know. Just like you have to do. Like there's so much time travel. Again, speaking of Thor, one of the best Thor stories, and do not go by the movie, the Blood and Thunder movie, but there's this really great Thor arc called like the God Butcher. So it's the same bad guys from the movie, but it's much more complicated. And it involves Thor from different parts of history. So it's like Thor from like 4 different timelines. And like, again, and they have to go into the future and fight and blah, blah. And again, it's just because you can write it that way because time travel is not real, right? One of the things is like, once it's over, none of them will remember and it won't hinder how their future goes forward. It's like, why? It's like, well, because the writer says so, you know? And it's like, you're right. I like it better this way. Because that's the whole thing, right? If you team up with like a past version of yourself to do something, it's just like, why wouldn't I have remembered this if I already did it, you know? It's endless. It's endless. As soon as you go back and change something, you change it. Like you should remember it then, you know. So, but I love Back to the Futures especially. Remember how like we were friends with a guy that looked exactly like what our teenage son would eventually evolve into? That's kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah. Like I mean, look exactly same guy, same voice and everything. We named him Marty. And it's just one of those weird things, I guess, that they looked and sounded exactly the same.
Hi, Mrs. Channel.
Here comes a werewolf. Oh, hello. A bit late.
I love the preview. I wanted to say Dumbledore's line back at Hagrid's hut when they free Buckbeak. In there, he's like you said, so they're so carefree about.
Yeah, I like it. Goes, they're like, it's gone. He goes, how extraordinary. Like that.
Yeah. I think I'll have a nice cup of tea or perhaps a large brandy.
Yeah. That was one thing. Oh, see here. This is the 3rd book. So this is Harry noticing his opposite seeker for the first time. The lovely Cho Chang. Before they had the Ravenclaw match. So yeah, so this is the 3rd book. So yeah, both Cedric and Cho actually are introduced in this book. Not the movie, but in the book. Yeah, we're pretty late in. They're being chased around by Lupin Werewolf. Trying to get Buckbeak. So they can fly up and rescue Sirius. You're Sirius in the Shrieking Shack, looking every bit like the serial killer he's supposed to be.
Yeah,
but he's not.
Creepy. Get down.
Some Charles Manson vibes for sure. Like, hey, you guys like the Beach Boys? Because I knew some of them.
Okay, this stuff is.
There's Pettigrew. Wormtail.
Yeah, he doesn't look the same.
Yeah, he's more skinny.
Yeah.
Than the actor.
But that, like you said, the Animagus and the Patronus being a stag and all that had to be explained by my friend Lindsay after. Because I was like, are they gonna?
Because it's like, okay, if Patronus takes the, it's like, okay, I guess. Yeah, Patronus can take the form of an animal, but is there any reason why it's like that specific animal? Like, yes, there is. Here's a bonus. Do you remember what animal Hermione's Patronus is?
Oh, gosh. No, I don't. Hold on.
You do see it briefly in the 5th movie where he's teaching them.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he's teaching them how to do Patronuses, and some of them do make them. You do see hers briefly. And it is right. It is what's in the book. Like, I don't think she ever winds up using it for anything in the books or the movies, but you do see it when she's learning it. It's a good critter.
Hers isn't the cat, is it?
It's an otter.
Otter.
Isn't that cool? It's an otter.
Yes,
because after this, the only Patronus
I knew that at one time.
Because the only Patronus that really plays a role going forward after this, besides Harry's, is Snape's, which is the doe. which is somehow connected to his mother, although his mother was not an animagus, so I don't know. I already done it. Does that make sense? No. That's some good time travel. Patronus. Oh, that's it. Yeah, it was her Patronus originally, and then after she died, it became his. I guess is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it is taking its hood off to do its soul kiss.
Oh wow. I don't know if I want to see that.
Some things are better left to the imagination, like what's under a Dementor's hood. See, this is completely removed from the movie, but there they are, finally winning that Quidditch Cup for Oliver Wood, so he doesn't lose his mind. Another thing, speaking again of the numbers problem, not enough kids at the school. It's like, I mean, think about it this way. Like, they say like in Britain, there's at least one. There might even be more than one like professional Quidditch leagues. So it's like, where are they recruiting from? Because they mentioned like Wood in later books that he got recruited by somebody, but it's not even like a very good team, and it's just like it's a very small pool. It seems to me like they make it seem like, yeah, Harry's a really good Quidditch player, but realistically, there's no chance of him being professional because only the very best. But I'm just thinking Harry must really be one of the very best. Honestly, it's funny. That's why I thought it was funny that everybody was so amazed that the best seeker that Bulgaria had to offer was a 17-year-old. I'm like, that's not too weird, really. You only have one school to recruit from. Maybe your 17-year-old's better than any of your older professionals. I can believe it, especially considering Quidditch. One of the reasons why I think it's a fully, co-ed sport is because it's not as physical as other sports. It's about how well there's physical stuff in it, but still, it's a fully integrated co-ed sport. Men and women in it. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's not too much of a stretch that a 17-year-old is physically mature enough to compete with older professionals at the Quidditch thing. So that's another thing where the numbers thing is kind of lined up. Seems to me like if you're on your Quidditch team for every single year you're at school, you're that good to keep your spot for 7 years, you're probably good enough to go pro.
Yeah.
And since Harry is considered one of the best of his era, I'm not saying he had to become a pro Quidditch player, but it seems like it would have been a real option for him, because you know how it is. You could be good at something in high school, but that doesn't mean you have any chance of doing it pro, because high school's high school. But it seems kind of different in the Quidditch world.
Well, I wonder if this goes back to your talking about how many other schools like Hogwarts there is. Maybe they're the Ivy League schools of their private schools of magic, and there's some lesser.
There might possibly
institutions.
They never mention it. I mean, maybe it could exist, but they always make it sound
like anybody who's a wizard.
Literally every adult you meet says they went to Hogwarts at some point or another. People can't be in two places at once, Ron. We blew your fucking mind, Ron. That is the fun part about time travel, too, right? For Ron, it's instantaneous. They disappeared, and then a couple seconds later, they appeared on the other side. They did all that stuff. That's one of the most funny things about Back to the Future Part 2, right? Is towards the end of Back to the Future Part 2, when he realizes he has to save Doc from being in the Old West, he's the only person that can help me is current Doc. So he runs up to 1955 Doc, seconds after Doc had gone through the entire ordeal of the clock tower and everything to send him back to 1985. He's like, woohoo, I did it. We did it. We got him back against all odds. We harnessed the power of the lightning. And seconds later, a different version of Marty runs up to him. Is like, I need you to send me back. That poor 1955 Doc. I love that reaction. He's like, what? He's like, you just went. He's like, I know, but I came back again. It's like, oh, time travel's awful. But we don't have time to get into it. But I'll say the biggest problem with time travel, basically in any sort of movie and story, is they don't really treat it like you're going to a different time. They treat it like you're going to a different place. Because they make it seem like there's a real clock that's always going. And that goes no matter where you are. Because it'd be like, okay, I'm here. I'm on base team. I have other team members are from Go Team. And Go Team has a mission in the past. So they go back to 1650 to kill the Pope. I don't know, right? but they might have some trouble doing it because the Pope is well guarded. So they leave at like 12 o'clock my time, but then they show up, in 16 whatever time. And then it takes them in the past, I don't know, they have like a day and a half of crazy adventures before they can finally kill the Pope. But they make it seem like if you're telling the story, they'll do a flashback to me like it's a meanwhile. It's like, meanwhile in the present, I'm like, they've been gone for 13 hours. It wouldn't work that way. There's no reason for it to work that way. Our time is not simultaneous. It doesn't flow. Hours for me is not the same thing as hours for them, and it's the same thing. I could send them back to the past to kill the Pope in 1650. It could take them a couple years to do it, and they could still appear seconds after I sent them. That's how time travel is supposed to work, right? But so many time travel stories and shows and movies and things like that make it seem like time is still universal for both of you. It's like, they've been in the past for 6 hours. What's taking them so long? Like, that's not an issue. That should never, ever happen. But anyway, because the past is not a place. The future is not a place. They are times, but it's just hard to write that way. So almost everything you read really makes it seem like, yeah, the past is a different time, but we treat it more like it's a location than a time. Anyway, that's the only hint you get there. Is he's like, I'm not a teacher anymore. I got fired, so I don't feel guilty in giving you this back. And he says, mischief managed. It's like, holy shit, he knows how the map works and everything. But again, what just raises more questions if you only watch the movie.
Yeah.
Like, how does he know that? But if you read the book, he wrote the goddamn map. Of course he knows. But yeah, so since they couldn't do the Firebolt subplot, which I don't mind. They just tack on here that he got as his present, and they have an ending.
It's a nice nod.
Flying. It's fine. I mean, at least it fits it in, so that by the time he's going Accio Firebolt in the fourth book, you're like, how come he has a Firebolt now? Like, we never saw him get it. We do see him get it, just at the very end. So I don't mind. They tack it on. That's no big deal. Like I said, not every subplot's needed. You don't need the subplot of, the possibly booby-trapped Firebolt. Blah, blah, blah. What's funny, though, is, like, that it is actually from him while he's on the run. Because they're all saying, like, it can't be from Black. You think Black can just go into a store and get a Firebolt? I can't remember if there is some sort of explanation for how he did it. Because it's like turning into a dog doesn't help you go into a store and buy advanced racing broom. And then, who knows? And you get to end on the thing. So, yeah, I did a lot of complaining for a movie I say is my favorite, but I don't know. My show will do it how I do think it's the best one. I like this movie a lot. I also like that where they are, now they're all about 13 years old or whatever. They're starting to grow up a tiny bit. They're still kids, but is this a really good movie as far as the change in style, which I get maybe was, that could have been a bit jarring for some people to go from the sort
it was
of the
jarring at first.
The first two movies. I like Cuarón a lot. He's just a really good director. I guess it's just as well he was one and done. Things worked out. It's hard. Like, it's hard for me to look at like the fourth, fifth, sixth movie and say they would have been better with a different director. I don't know. There was one thing that happened once you got that other guy is like he did 3 or 4 in a row. So you did get a uniform feel for them. So you could say this one feels like an outlier because it's the only one that was directed by one director who was one and done. But I don't know. Sometimes one and dones fit in better than you might think.
Aren't the next two one and dones?
Oh, maybe. Who's the director of the fourth?
I think
so the fourth director didn't stay either.
Mike Newell or something?
Goblet of Fire. Okay, wait. I need to look up Goblet of Fire.
I like the same
Goblet
credits
of Fire was directed by
Map.
Yes. So Steve Kloves did Goblet of Fire. Is that the only one he did?
No, Steve Kloves was the screenwriter of most of these.
Oh shit! I clicked the wrong. Yeah, Kloves. He's the guy I was complaining about. I clicked on the wrong thing. Yeah, Mike Newell was the director.
Yeah.
Of Goblet of Fire. So he was one and done as well.
I think so, because then there's a different one on the fifth. And the fifth is a one and done, I think, unless if that's the same director for the rest of them.
No, I'm pretty sure after the fifth, it's all the same guy.
Yeah, sixth on.
Yates? Is it David Yates?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Because I feel like David Yates had a very uniform style. You could definitely tell how they fit together.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's 7 books. It's 8 movies out of 7 books with multiple directors. I do think they flow and hang together pretty well. It is hard if you're just doing it in the context of taking them one movie at a time. You watch the first 2 movies, Chris Columbus, they have sort of a uniform look and feel. You get to the third one, it's a lot darker. It's not just darker in tone and stuff, but it's more shadowy. It uses weird angles. you know, it can feel a bit jarring, like I said. And then the fourth movie, once again, is a bit different. The fourth movie is not dark. Like, it's not, it's a serious movie with serious implications. I mean, that's where you finally see a return to power Voldemort in it. But I would say it's not a dark movie. It's my favorite of the books. It can't be my favorite movie because they simply cut so much of it. So look forward to that, people. You're going to love next show, people, where I blather on about all the stuff they cut. But yeah, I feel like I seem maybe overly harsh on this one because of how upset I am with how they botched the all the reveal stuff going on in the Shrieking Shack. But apart from that, I really like the movie. I love the look of it. I think it does have good flow. At least some of the stuff they cut, I do understand why they did it, and I think it's more or less okay. You're not going to lose too much from it. I'm getting hot under the bright lights here. Everybody, look out!
Excuse
me. Become a strip show. A strip show. Boom.
The end credits map. I don't know if you heard me. I did think this is clever, and with the Marauders map and the using.
Akers, I'm sorry if I missed questions. I tried to answer some of them.
I get so wrapped up in the film CIA itself training.
Too. Great to hear. Like, hey, I tried to answer some of them. I answered a lot of Quidditch questions and sports questions. In a dog version, who would play Harry? What kind of? I don't know. I don't think enough about dogs to know that. An Irish setter. I don't really understand the infiltration of school things and MK Ultra. I don't really understand how that would apply at all. You're thinking on a different level there for me. I like making like stretches and saying, oh, this is a symbol of this or that, but MK Ultra, like, that's crazy to me. I don't know. But it's not like I don't like dogs. I don't know. I do like dogs. I'm jealous of Jess. He has a dog. Like, I haven't owned a dog in my adult life. Like, I grew up with dogs in my family. But as I've lived on my own, I've realized, like, I don't live a lifestyle that would be good for a dog. Like, it wouldn't be fair to the dog.
They're a lot of work.
They need more care than cats do. And, they need more routine and stability. And I do not offer that. So, plus, when I first moved to this building, dogs weren't allowed. It's kind of funny how this building did, like, a huge U-turn on dogs. Not that I mind, but dogs were not allowed when I first moved to this building. And a few years ago, they were like, okay. And, like, not only did so many people move in with dogs, but they moved in with, like, big dogs. Like, I lived down the hallway from people with, like, 2 or 3 big dogs. And I have to give them credit because it can't be easy living in a fairly smallish apartment with those dogs and the needs they have. Like, I give them credit. That's awesome because I'm sure they're good owners and they take good care of them. Like, I couldn't do that shit with one dog. Even, like, a small, manageable dogs. But, no, I live in like, I go out in the halls all the time and people are coming down the hallway with, like, fairly large dogs, and I think that's awesome. But I couldn't really do it. But yeah, I like dogs. It's not like I don't like dogs, but I don't think that I can figure out a way to come up with dog equivalents for people. I can't even fit Bill Pullman into this world. I can't do it with dog actors. But I hear we're talking about him. He wants to get in on the conversation.
I know, and she starts in.
Oh, her. My cat abandoned me. She's usually close, so I think she's mad that I cluttered up this area with my notes and books and things.
Nice bone. Don't want your bone.
But yeah, we still got the credits going. Hopefully, for the 4th, we won't have as big a gap. I know this is our first one since like before Christmas or something like that. I mean, sometimes I'm fairly confident we'll be able to get to the 4th one sooner than that. It'd be great if we could do it like within like a month or so. Like, I don't mind spacing them out a bit. They are big things, but we'll try to figure that out going forward. But I know I'll watch this back and I'll realize there's things that I ignored that I should have talked about because I was on a tangent about something else, and I know I couldn't get to I don't know. I'm never going to be happy with it completely. Jess is just glad he got to talk at all.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy listening, and and there's going to be things that I'm like, oh shoot, I meant to tell you about this.
Yeah, but the big thing, I had wanted to ask, and I knew it was a hard thing to ask because it's hard for me to remember too. It's like how well did you grasp some of that stuff the first time you watched the movie, since at that point you hadn't read the book, so you can remember that you needed to be filled in on certain things.
I did for sure.
You weren't sure about it.
But I also thought, hey, don't tell me if this is supposed to be revealed later. Mm-hmm. And he was, I mean, not all the books have been released, but even he was pretty sure, like, no, they just left that out and they shouldn't have.
Yeah. No. But I don't think I'm wrong, though, right? Like, I don't think you needed, like, 15 more minutes. You only needed a few more minutes of some simple, like, lines of dialogue. I'd have to, I'll watch the scene again, but that scene, it's not just stuff they leave out, but the order they do stuff in is mixed up and weird too. And it's too fast. And yeah, I just don't understand if that's Steve Close, if that's him doing the adaptation there, figuring out the dialogue, what to include and what not to. I don't know what his thought process there is at all. Because as I said, there's sometimes where they'll drop things like I talked about Sir Cadogan. Yeah, the movie is fine without Sir Cadogan. The movie is fine without the subplot of the possibly booby-trapped Firebolt. Doesn't need those things. And the movie doesn't need every single classroom scene. The movie doesn't need every single Hogsmeade visit necessarily, although I am on the fence about that one. I really do feel like they crammed too much into the Christmas one. They should have had at least the one more. But yeah, I guess that's okay. But yeah, I mean, really good. It's just the perfect movie for that director. I think he could have done other movies too, but he moved on, and that's fine. This is, again, sort of a dark, twisted one. The Shrieking Shack and some of the visuals are just a little more dark and shadowy. There you are. Don't you want some attention? Don't you want to be on camera? Say no, I don't want to be part of this at all. Well, that's okay. Say hello. You're on camera.
Hello, kitty.
This is Camille. You're a good girl. Yeah, I know. She doesn't want to be here because all like this. It's all a bunch of notes and stuff next to me. It's like I couldn't be here because you cluttered up the couch. Fair point.
Mm-hmm. Clear some space for the girl.
But yeah, she's more low maintenance than a dog.
Oh, definitely.
But I do miss dogs, like, because I mean,
puppy. We're still in the puppy stages, and it sounds like for this breed will be for a while.
I mean, that's one of the things. It's one of the things I like, though, because I mean, as someone who's, she's my second cat, of myself, like a Wednesday I had for 16 years. She passed away in the summer of 2021. So I mean, over that time when people would meet me and say I live with a cat, like I think some people would just assume I'm just like some sort of cat person who's not a dog person. That's not true at all. Like I love dogs. I grew up with dogs. I adore dogs. I'm always happy to see them, and I'm always feel a little jealous when I see people out in public with them. But just no, where I'm living and the way I live my life, it wouldn't be great for a dog. But that doesn't mean that I would, maybe someday I'll have a house and I can have it. I'll be better at my hours and things. I'll have a more structured life and I can have a dog. There's still plenty of time for that. So, but no. Yeah. I like cats and dogs. People sometimes make it seem like you have to choose between them or something. No, I like both.
I like animals in general as well. I've met some really cool cats in my day.
Yeah, I mean, I loved animals growing up. I had 2 iguanas. I had a mynah bird. I really liked animals. But now it's just it's good to have a cat. She's great company. She's very social. And
nice.
My parents, my mom has 2 cats. One who just turned 16, and again, they're very He's so old that we still had our last dog when we got him as a kitten. So he and the cat who was his brother, who sadly passed away in 2016, he has a new younger brother now who will be turning 7. They were very influenced by our dog. They were very social and dog-like. That's been my experience with most of my cats, except for Wednesday. Like most of the cats in our family have been more dog-like. Like they're very social, they're very outgoing. They're not like moody or aloof or independent. They like to be where people are. When I come home, she greets me. That kind of stuff.
Nice.
So I mean, there's some dog influence there for sure. It took that long for that's the end of the thing. Knox.
Same here.
Yeah, it took that long. So that's probably a good place to stop. No point in going on too long here because, like I said, we have plenty ahead. I mean, we're not even halfway through these movies, and they're getting bigger and longer and more complicated. I'll have so much more to complain about. But no, I mean, I think all the movies are pretty good. Although I'll just say, right, we have one more before it, but prepare yourselves for Order of the Phoenix. Because I think Order of the Phoenix is a pretty bad movie, I have to say. And it's for simple reasons. It's the longest book in the series and the shortest movie. So, I mean, what do you expect, So I have a ton of problems with that. But the good news is Goblet of Fire is first, which is my favorite book and maybe second favorite movie. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's pretty good. So that's what's up next. So that'll be fun. So thanks for everybody that tuned in. Sorry, Acres, so I couldn't answer all your questions. The dog from Maine. Hi, dog from Maine. Maine's cool. I've been to Maine a few times, and Orc lives in Maine. So there you go. M-A-I-N-E spells Maine. That's from Fudgemania. You ever like read a book or something that has like a little like has like a little snippet of like a made up, like not a real song, but like a snippet of a song or a rhyme, and somebody just nails it perfectly, even though it's not based on anything? Because there's a part. Okay, so Fudgemania, you know those, like Super Fudge. That's why I owned a Minor.
I kind of do remember those, yeah, from my youth.
It was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. He had a younger brother named Fudge and Super Fudge, and they got a minor bird named Uncle Feather. So I did the same thing because I was obsessed. Literally, I did. I got a minor bird named Uncle Feather. The only weird name I've ever given a pet. We don't have time for that thing, but Jay has heard me go on about this a lot. Like, to me personally, I think if you wouldn't name a baby the name, you shouldn't give it to an animal either, but that's entirely up to people. Like, I think animals deserve dignity and proper names. Uncle Feather was sort of an exception, but he was a tribute to a character. But anyway, so in that, they go on a trip to Maine, and there's a part where Fudge is singing out how spelling Maine. He's singing out how to spell it. And my sister always knew it perfectly. She said, M-A-I-N-E spells Maine. I mean, and that's perfect, right? That's obviously how he said it. There's no other way he could have said it. Just like I remember there was like this little song that one of the characters made up in one of the Wayside school books about looking for his sock. And my sister sang that. And I know the tune she made up is perfect for it. It's like, I got one sock, looking for the other, one sock, trying to find its brother. When I find that sock, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put it on my foot and I'll stick it in my shoe. There's no way that is not the perfect tune for that. So I have to give my sister credit. She knows tunes. I'll give one more example. I won't sing that. I don't have to sing it. It's like, I remember, and I can't remember it. You ever have like weird things come to you and then you can't remember what you did? This happens to me all the time. So years and years ago, this probably wasn't even the first time I was reading the book. I was reading one of the Song of Ice and Fire books, right? Game of Thrones. So there's a part where Sam is with Gilly traveling, and she asks Sam to sing a song because she doesn't know anything. She's, a wildling. He's like, I guess I know some songs. I'm not a very good singer. She's like, I'd just like to hear anything. So he sings this song about like the 7 gods or whatever and how they are good for children. And I was in the tub and I just made up a tune for it. And I swear to God, it was so perfect it should have been recorded. But now I can't remember it. But, that happens.
Oh, definitely have done that.
I think part of it comes from having a churchy upbringing. Like, once you figure out sort of how like a lot of like hymns kind of sound the same, it's kind of easy to make up a tune yourself, is what I found. I kind of based what I did on that on like how I remember hymns sounded, because I was like, what he's singing is obviously kind of like a hymn. So I was just like, what, use your hymn knowledge, and it worked pretty well. But of course, I couldn't remember now. So but I swear to you, that day in the tub, I was like, this is perfect. I should like send it to music and send it to J.R.R. Martin, George Martin. But anyway, blah blah blah. Too much of that. So we'll let you go. Thanks a lot, anybody who tuned in now or in the future. We're really glad to have been able to get back to this one after a fairly long break. Hopefully it won't be so long before we get to Goblet of Fire. It's a lot of fun. So yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but that was my favorite one. But it's not all downhill from here. I still like the other movies. I have plenty of positive things to say.
Oh, yes.
I still have the illustrated one for the next one. The one of these isn't out yet. So I probably won't have it in time for that. I don't know how long it would take for that to get out. I wasn't even going to get this. I got lucky on this because of a gift card situation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten it because it's just they're expensive books. They're really cool, but I just, one, they're very fragile, so you better be good at being able to take care of them. And 2, it's a lot of money to drop. So I can't recommend them to absolutely everybody, but they're fun. So I probably won't have that for the next one, but I do have the illustrated edition. The latest illustrated edition to come out is the 5th one, which I don't have yet, but maybe I will have that by the time we do the movie. Excuse me. We'll see. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to Jess, and we'll see you all next time. Peace out, everybody. Mischief managed, and Knox.